Welcome to the Fantasy Fangirls podcast, where two sisters dive deep into beloved fantasy lore, characters, themes, series, and more.
I'm Lexi.
And I'm Nicole.
And today we are so excited to be covering chapters 15 through 21 of A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J. Maas. As always, let's kick it off with our content warnings. While we're focusing today's discussion on chapters 15 through 21 and the whole ACOWAR book, we are going to bring in themes, foreshadowing, lore, and other insights across the entire ACOTAR series. So yes, that means that all of these episodes include spoilers for the whole ACOTAR series. They do not, however, include spoilers for the rest of Sarah J. Maas's series, except at the end of every episode where we include our Maas vs. Madness segment. We'll give a big old spoiler warning so you can leave the episode if you haven't read the Maasverse, or you can keep listening for Throne of Glass and /horror Crescent City callouts.
So with all of that said, if you don't know why half of this episode is spent in the dining room, then please go finish the books. We will be here when you're done.
Next, we at Fantasy Fangirls are adults who say adult things about adult books. In other words, friends, this podcast is rated R.
We got a saucy library scene that includes a mention of Bryaxis. Who else absolutely forgot about this? Me! Don't worry, though, because I will be reminding all of you. But please be mindful of those little listening ears.
Additionally, we are so excited for the Dragon Gauntlet in Boyne City, Michigan this August 16th and 17th. We're doing a waterfront live show on the 16th. We have dragon trivia for the epic mountainside scavenger hunt the next morning, and we can't wait to dance the night away with you at the evening bookish themed ball.
Learn all about the Dragon Gauntlet and get your tickets before August 2nd at the link in the show notes. And Patreon members, check out your portal because you got a discount code.
Speaking of, if you love Fantasy Fangirls and have been loving this ACOTAR series journey we're on together, if you want more content, more community, more events, and just more all around, please check out our Patreon.
We have 2 membership tiers that you can join. The Valkyries, which includes access to our Boppin' Discord, live Q&As from Lexi and I, community events, and a book club, promo codes for live events, plus 20% off discounted and exclusive merch, all for $5 a month. Or you can join the High Fae, which includes everything from the Valkyrie level, plus early access to ad-free episodes, our full episode outlines, and special voting privileges. And that's all for $10 a month.
Join the party at patreon.com/fantasyfangirls. The link is also in the show notes. And really and truly, thank you so much for supporting us as we've turned this podcast into our livelihood. It's all because of you.
And now it is time to learn how to fly. I believe I can fly.
As always, Nicole's going to kick off this episode by summarizing what happens in chapters 15 through 21 of ACOWAR. So gather around, friends. We need an inner circle debrief.
Chapter 15. Feyre and Rhys finish up their bangity bang with a climax of a ring exchange, and the inner circle gathers again in the townhouse. After a judgy Lucien gets a verbal slap from Rhys, everyone flies to the House of Wind. But before the sisters are reunited, it's time to tell Lucien the truth. Feyre gives her own Chapter 54 download with colorful commentary from Rhys and Cassian, and thank goodness, Lucien can see clearly now. The Tam is gone. Entering the House of Wind's library, Feyre is reunited with Nesta, and it's heartfelt. It's a sisterly reunion with love and tears. Nope, Nesta's still a bitch. But it's time to see the other sister. She'll be a delight, right? Walking into a sunny room, it's a heartfelt sisterly reunion with love and tears. Nope, Elaine is not doing so hot and is a vacant shell, who reminds everyone, including her mate, that she was supposed to be married next week. Oh, ouch. Chapter 16. Time for a tour of Lucien's new residence with one big old stipulation. You cannot talk to the sisters or else you'll get locked up in a room with Amren. Ruh-roh. Speaking of that tiny ancient one, our crew heads over to her apartment, and her opening words are, kill Baron and his other children so that Lucien can become High Lord. Damn, Amren, it's nice to see you too. Blatant murder aside, our crew gives a huge old download about Hybern, his allies, and how they went to see Miriam and Draken. But their island of Cretea was in complete shambles. Dun dun dun. And since they're really fucked with the odds on this war, a plan is formed. Gather the 7 courts and rally the High Lords and try to get as many people to not join Hybern as possible. Simple enough. But more is coming in with a theorizing. Perhaps the cauldron is not at full power if it needs help to take the whole wall down. So those who are made can theoretically patch it up. Like Nesta, who Rhys insults and Feyre snaps at him, making the whole room so cold the penguins could march through it. But Feyre agrees that she will ask her sister for help. Chapter 17. Feyre, avoiding Rhys, gets some time in the skies with Cassian and they discuss Nesta because she clearly has got some wild powers going on. Later, it is time for family dinner in the dining room. Mor attempts to connect with Nesta and compliments her dress, to which Nesta insults her in return. So close. Nesta talks to Amren about her glowy eyes, and Amren shares that it's part of her containment spell and that they're not that different in more ways than one. Talks of the High Lord meeting starts to arise, and Lucien offers his 2 cents, which is more like $1,000 because damn, homeboy is smart and super wasted in the Spring Court. Chapter 18. Rhys announces that it's time to go to the Court of Nightmares to ask Mor's father, Keir, to fight in the war with Hybern, and it clearly does not go over well, hurting Mor's feelings. Feyre asks Nesta if she'd be willing to lend a hand with patching up some holes in the wall, and she agrees, getting a new mentor in the process, Amren. However, her agreements stop there because when Feyre asks Nesta to go to the High Lord's meeting and share her extremely traumatic story, she says, hell no! And if they even so much as ask Elaine, she will rip their throats out. Ah, sisterly love. Feyre and Rhys go for a midnight stroll and kiss and make up from their super awkwardness earlier, agreeing that they will not challenge each other in public. But private, all bets are off, starting now. Feyre also mentions how Rhys needs to be super careful with Keir because clearly it can hurt Mor's feelings. Oops! Chapter 19, it's time for training. Training our feelings, that is. Cassian opens up to Feyre about how he's super angry with her and Rhys because they forgot to tell him that, oh, I don't know, super important piece of info that she is High Lady and that she sacrificed herself to go to the Spring Court, the same shit that Rhys pulled 50 years ago. But someone catches Cassian's eye. It's time for verbal sparring with your favorite partner, Cassian. Feyre begs down the bond for Rhys to come get her, but he sends Azriel to her rescue. Looks like it's flying time. To a remote location they go. Azriel instructs Feyre on how to make the right wings. Girthiness of the muscles and all. Don't worry, Azriel, yours are the girthiest. Chapter 20, field trip to the library. Walking in its inky depths, Feyre and Rhys discuss some lighthearted topics, like how humans were not in libraries, how half-fae, half-human children were murdered. Oh yeah, and how some humans have magic. Who else forgot about this? Me. We also learn about the High Priestess Clotho and her incredibly horrific story about how she ended up in the library, which has become a sanctuary to all sorts of priestesses with similar backgrounds. I don't know what kind of sanctuary has a dark pit with a creature so horrific that the general of all the Night Court armies was so terrified that he will not talk about it, but to each their own. At their workstation, Feyre and Rhys prep for a big old study session, but let's turn up the heat. Rhys teases Feyre thighs and winnows away. I have to study, Feyre. You're distracting me. We learn some goody information about the wall, and when the study session is over, Feyre has a brilliant beyond brilliant plan. Let's get the bone carver onto our side so that we're less fucked in this war. Chapter 21. Feyre drops in on Amren and Nesta's first lesson, and it's clearly going well because it's silent. That night, Feyre has a dream about Under the Mountain and her sisters being mutilated like Claire Better. Never forget you, Claire! Rhys wakes her up from the nightmare, rubbing her back, and she vomits on the floor. But Feyre rolls over and begins to mentally prepare for her busy day of back-to-back prison and Court of Nightmare visits, which we will cover next episode. Lexi, do you know who our self-care queen is?
Who?
Amren, because between jewels and gowns, she really knows how to take care of herself, and we aspire to be just like her. But with Blissey, taking care of ourselves also extends to our pillowcases.
Set yourself up with better sleep with Blissey's award-winning 100% mulberry silk pillowcases. Silk is what's best for your hair and skin. Seriously, it reduces frizz, tangles, and prevents breakage. That's because it keeps the moisture in your hair and keeps your skincare products and natural moisture on your skin, while cotton literally absorbs it right on off your face. Say goodbye to wrinkles, dry, flaky, and red skin in the morning, and wake up with healthier and shinier hair.
There are a lot of dupes out there that claim satin can be alternative to silk, but that is not the case. Satin is made from synthetic fibers like polyester, while silk is luxurious and all natural fiber. Silk is the most breathable, moisture wicking, and gentle. It's also more durable and long-lasting. Think of it as an investment in getting better sleep and waking up feeling ready to take on the day.
I love my Blissy pillowcase. It keeps my hair from looking like it's been through a tornado when I wake up.
Everyone loves them. They've also got tons of different prints and colors, and they make great gifts because there's literally an option for anyone, men, you as well. They also have over 1 million raving fans, and you could be next. Try now risk-free for 60 nights at blissy.com/FFGpod and get an additional 30% off. That's BLISSY.com/FFGpod and use code FFGpod to get an additional 30% off. Your skin and hair will thank you.
It's time to step into the cauldron and discuss key insights, character analysis, foreshadowing, theories, and oh, so much more. As Feyre prepares to go to the House of Wind to see her sisters for the first time since returning to Velaris, the tension and catching Lucien up on the truth continues. Feyre's in a bit of an awkward position as she both protects Lucien from the Inner Circle and is wary of him like the Inner Circle. Lucien is obviously an outsider, basically an enemy, but not really enemy territory. He has been a participant in the hurt against her, no matter his attempts to help save her, and he has been Tamlin's closest emissary. He's called the Spring Court home, so naturally he has been Team Tamlin and Feyre. Again, we have to put ourselves in his shoes and what the Night Court has purposefully made itself out to be, specifically Rhys acting and being Lucien's enemy for centuries. Lucien is also here for Elaine, who is in a fragile state, and the Inner Circle is also now very protective of her. Of course, the Inner Circle isn't going to welcome him with open arms, and he's not going to suddenly be all buddy-buddy with them, or even be super warm to Feyre, who has revealed herself to be an enemy of Tamlin and the Spring Court when she pretended otherwise for over a month.
Not to mention, as Feyre and Rhys walk downstairs, there is a new accessory on their finger. She has her sapphire ring from the Weaver, and Rhys has a simple silver band. And Lucien sneers at these two rings. Lucien knew that Feyre loved Rhys, and he knew that they were mates. But knowing it and seeing it along with rings, a literal physical manifestation of their love, are two very different things. Lucien is wildly outside of his comfort zone. So his defense in the scene makes a lot of sense. He grew up in a place that was very much not safe. He always needed to be looking over his shoulder for a new threat, whether it was his brothers or members of the Autumn Court. In the Spring Court, yes, it was basically the most close thing to a peaceful existence. But there was also living under Amarantha's curse. And then there was also living under Tamlin's "we need to be a unified front." And Tamlin could burst literally at any moment. So there was always that anxiety and never being able to feel like at peace with Lucien. He has never been to a place like Velaris. So of course, he's going to be nervous and he's going to be a disbeliever. Not to mention, I'm not even touching all the things that he's heard about Rhys in the Night Court for his entire life. He also just spent over a month thinking that his mate, Elaine, was in the horrific clutches of that Night Court that he's been hearing about. I do have a note for Rhys. He does not really ease any of Lucien's fears or make him feel at all comfortable in this scene if he says, quote, "If you threaten anyone in this house, this territory, we'll show you ways to die you never even imagined." Like, that is 100% in alignment with who Lucien's always thought Rhys to be. Plus, Rhys begins talking about Tamlin locking up Feyre in the house and destroying the study, and his wings like rip out from his back. I love that picture there. This is a rare wing watch from Rhys where Rhys is actually losing control. This is closer to I can't believe I'm making this comparison. This is closer to a claw watch, really, where Tamlin like gets really heightened emotionally and like his claws rip from his skin. However, it is Rhys being very protective over his mate. So it is still Rhys showing the truest version of Rhys. It's just the angry version of Rhys, especially given Lucien's role in Feyre being locked up, the study exploding the first time, and Lucien not knowing or doing anything about it. But Lucien is realizing in this stretch more and more how different the Night Court is from what he's been told. Later, when Feyre comments how they really do not enforce protocol or rank in this court, Lucien says, quote, "Obviously, Rhys lives in a townhouse by the cauldron." First of all, I love "by the cauldron." Like, I don't know why that brings me so much joy. That's awesome. I giggle at this one thing really stands out to Lucien. But again, think about his father. He lived in that like treehouse mansion, basically, or like the underground treehouse mansion. And then there was, you know, Tamlin, who lived in the Spring Court, who always did protocol and always made sure that was number one. So of course, this is like the most eye-opening experience for Lucien.
Lucien does show that he is open-minded to hearing Rhys and Feyre's side of the story, as he will smartly say, quote, "There is a longer story to be told, it seems." As Tamlin's number one and maybe only hype man, his brain has some rewiring to do now knowing that Feyre and Rhys are madly in love, mated, and married. And personally, I think he does a phenomenal job with his willingness to hear the abbreviated version of Chapter 54.
Yes.
Lucien is a fox without a home right now. He wants to see his mate even just once and is real-time learning that everything he's ever known about Rhys and the Night Court is a facade. He's also hearing a different perspective of Feyre's time in the Spring Court. As he'll say to her, he didn't realize he was a villain in her story. That's one of the things I do love about this story and how realistic the character dynamics are. Perspective is everything. You can be the hero in one story and the villain in another. Like Feyre acknowledges, Lucien isn't evil at all. He's not even necessarily her enemy. He has been mostly due to association. And now that he chose to sever that association, it's like, okay, now what do we do with him? Like, how do we all feel about this? I will say I'm a little surprised that Feyre, Rhys, or even more never told Cassian or Azriel that Tamlin locked her up in the house. I guess I assumed it came up at some point during ACOMAF from the healing journey they all helped her on, but it leans into this story's theme of choice. Rhys and Mor did not tell the others because it was not their story to tell.
Just like when Feyre and Lucien were on their tour de Prythian, Feyre thought about how Lucien was asking her about when did you fall in love with Rhys? And she was like, I'm not going to share Rhys' story because it's not mine to share. I'm guessing it's a very similar thing with what Rhys is doing here. He's not wanting to share Feyre's part of the story, especially something that was so highly traumatic for her with Cassian and Az, given the fact that it is not Rhys' story to share, it is Feyre's.
Once at the House of Wind, I love how it's like Lucien can't stop staring at Velaris. He's so captivated by the city and he's soaking it all in like a sponge. He has lived in Prythian his whole life and never imagined a place like this could exist. He's also got a lot of thinking and processing to do, obviously. And where better than staring out at the city that is part of the reason why he's thinking and processing so much. Feyre shares everything with him to help him understand, even bringing the others in to share their commentary and aid in Lucien getting the whole picture. Now that she's not in the Spring Court and consumed with her revenge against Tamlin, she isn't treating Lucien like a pawn anymore. We called her out on how she treated Lucien as a casualty of the Spring Court downfall, but when it mattered most, when she had the opportunity to stop Ianthe from preying on Lucien, Feyre came through. Now she's out of the Spring Court and able to be her full self again, no longer dead set on her manipulation. She sees Lucien not as a pawn, but as a person again.
Lucien needed to hear this full download from Rhys and Feyre before he sees Elain for the first time. Yes, to know that Elaine's been safe and cared for here in Velaris, and so that he didn't do anything stupid like try to escape with her because he believed them to be in danger, but mainly so that he knew his mate is in a support system, and honestly, so he knows that he's in one as well. He knows that Elain is going to be mega traumatized. I don't think he knows to what degree or what that's going to show up as, like it does here, but he knows that something is going to be off from her because of what happened in the cauldron. Obviously, that was highly traumatic. But the more safe she is and the more safe he realizes she is, it'll be easier for him to help and aid his mate in getting back to being herself again. This download from Rhys and Feyre also helps ease his own anxiety with seeing her for the first time and feeling like he needs to, be that immediate mate to her. It helps calm his own fight or flight down. Like, I just think character-wise, I love that he got this before going to see Elain.
Yeah, definitely. But enough about Lucien, for now at least. Let's check in on the Archeron sisters, who aren't doing so hot, each in their own way. I want to set the stage for what life has been like for Nesta this past month, and I'm going to pull in some insights we get from Silver Flames. During these initial weeks of turning Fae and being in the House of Wind, Nesta is terrified and protective of Elain, begging her to demonstrate any sign of wanting to live. Nesta barely sleeps in fear of Elain attempting to commit suicide. This is so sad. She and Elain have connecting suite rooms, so she can easily access her little sister and check in on her. Nesta will also later admit that she is unable to get into a bathtub due to her trauma from being submerged in the cauldron, and she has to use buckets to bathe herself.
We also learn in this scene with seeing Nesta that she styled her hair so that it covers her pointed ears. It's almost like she's wanting to look in the mirror and see herself as human still.
Yeah.
Not wanting to even associate with being Fae.
Exactly. She spends her time wandering the halls of the House of Wind, quote, like a ghost. But her favorite place is this private family library where Feyre and Rhys find her now. It's become her little sanctuary. She discovered smutty books here and has been devouring them in her desperation for any lifeline to keep her from falling apart, from bellowing at what has been done to her body, her life, to Elaine. I know we'll get more into this when we deep dive Silver Flames, but I love this little nod to smutty books being Nesta's escape and helping her through a really difficult time in life. Because, hey, romantasy is exactly that for us readers.
Like, you just said that and I was like, whoa, I feel seen. Like, goodness, wow. Feyre observes her sister curled in an armchair looking relaxed and content. And immediately this is surprising not only to Feyre but also as readers because this is so un-Nesta-like behavior. This is a Nesta with her mask off. It is the first time we readers and really Feyre are seeing her this way, relaxed, content with her books and her stories and disassociating. We love it. But then when Feyre scuffs her shoe on the ground, Nesta's back goes stiff and every part of her shoots up, that mask immediately coming back on. Nesta, in her mind, has to be someone who has her walls up to protect herself and her emotions from the rest of the world. The thicker and harder the exterior, the harder it is for someone to get in and hurt her, quite frankly. So being soft and relaxed and at ease is never something she lets others see. That is for right now. Thank God Silver Flames exists.
Fun fact, I searched the word devastating or devastatingly to see how often it's described for beauty in this series because I feel like it's all over the pages. And yep, we get it 6 times describing beauty across the books.
Oh, that's interesting.
Nesta may have turned Fae and her whole life has been uprooted, but she's still Nesta. As a greeting to Feyre, she sizes her up and says, "You're back." And then adds while looking at Cassian, "What do you want?" Feyre retorts, "At least immortality hasn't changed some things about you." Nesta continues to appear cold, unbothered, and stoic. But I love this little, I don't want to call it a slip up, but she expresses interest when she asks if Feyre accomplished her goal of destroying their enemies. Remember, Nesta has a personal vendetta against the ones Feyre was trying to bring down.
That's interesting because I read the, like, oh, you accomplished it. I read that as almost like a, oh, wow. You did do that? Like, you
really?
did do that thing you set out to? Which I thought was kind of sad.
I interpreted it as like interested surprise. Like, oh, did you like actually accomplish this? Not like in like a dig way at her, but like a, oh, wow, like that's pretty impressive. But I can definitely see where you're coming from there. That, again, love it when we have different perspectives.
Me too.
Feyre assures her that Ianthe suffered, but when Nesta shows rage and fear in her eyes, Feyre quickly amends, "Not enough," which, again, that's just like a little sister.
Yep, like, absolutely. 100%. It's like, it's not like I didn't live up to your expectations, but it's like, oh, I can do better. I can do better. I don't really feel
exactly
like
what it is.
It's a little sister thing.
But for someone who does not typically show much interest in others, it's a big deal when Nesta asks a question. We'll get into that a little bit later, too, with Amren. Like usual, though, Nesta quickly puts her wall right back up and goes extra hard with the only weapon at her disposal, her sharp words. She and Feyre have always had a strenuous relationship. We've talked about it. We will keep talking about it. We know this. And to no one's surprise, even after both turning Fae, being brought into this unknown world of fairies, and both worrying for their middle sister, there is still that wedge. Nesta believes letting down her guard is a sign of weakness. She is someone who feels everything, and she is someone who likes control, needs control, but so much of her life seems to be out of her control, especially this, being kidnapped, turning Fae, and coming to Velaris. So to gain control back, she wields sharp words to protect herself from feeling, to not let anyone see her own vulnerability. She pushes all of her feelings down, and it has become second nature to her where, as we'll learn in Silver Flames, she has a hard time breaking this hurtful cycle she has created for herself. But back to Feyre, the youngest archer and sister, she has it all as far as Nesta's concerned. She is out there defeating their enemies. She found true love, and he happens to be the most powerful political player, which is what Nesta was trained to marry for. She has embraced being Fae, embraced her powers, embraced this new family and home. And then we have Nesta, who doesn't have any of that, who would tell you she doesn't want any of that, because to even admit she does want to, even to herself, it would open up emotions and feelings that would swallow her whole. This competitive nature between these two sisters has festered in Nesta. And since Feyre is, quote, winning, Nesta will bring her down with, again, the only tool she has, her words and her outward hate.
And it's not surprising at all that Rhys sees this attitude towards his mate and has some strong feelings about it. He is very protective over both his mate and his brother Cassian, who he's seeing someone threaten them with malice words and does not really choose to be very kind towards them. I think that's the nicest way I could possibly say that. So right now,
as he says, she is difficult.
She is difficult. And let's be real, he's not wrong. Like, he's not wrong.
Yeah.
Nesta is very difficult. Like, we're both not saying like, oh, everything's fine with Nesta just because she's going through this. Like, this is going to be a very long, complicated relationship with Nesta.
And I will say, I love her character, but I don't think I would like hanging out with her by any means. Like, she and I would not be friends. I don't think she would like me. I would not like her. But I love her character because it has so much depth to it.
Right now, Rhys, instead of being a verbal protector, like even like a shield protector, he is silent support for specifically Feyre. There's a moment after Nesta verbally slaps Feyre in this scene where, quote, Rhys puts a hand on the small of my back before the words even struck their target. I love this show don't tell of like before the words even struck their target, because to me, as I'm reading it, that's almost like he knew she was going to say something cruel. So he's like preemptively protecting his mate and showing that support. He does not think highly of Nesta, so it would not be out of the question for him to constantly be assuming the worst, because he does for multiple books. But then in contrast, before we move to Elain, I just want to point out just how different he is in his acting toward Elain versus Nesta. He asks questions to Elain with immense amounts of gentleness. He also asks questions versus a lot more statements to Nesta, if he's even saying anything at all. He also slides a supportive arm around Feyre when she's looking at Elain and talking to her. But it's more of like a comfort rather than like that protective, like I'm on the small of your back, like I'm here with you. It's more of a like, it's okay, we'll get through this together. So I think that dichotomy is so different, and it only continues getting starker and starker throughout the books.
Understanding how protective Nesta is of Elain, even more so now when she's genuinely scared for her sister because she has lost the will to live or will wither away despite Nesta's best efforts to care for her, it's no shock that she initially refuses to let Lucien see Elain. Besides wanting to shield her sister from anyone who might cause her even the slightest, tiniest bit of discomfort, Nesta does not comprehend the mating bond and what it means for the Fae. By the way, I love how Cassian gives her like a crooked grin during this conversation. The Cassian and Nesta mate foreshadowing in this book is just so delicious, and I can't wait to get to their dynamic shortly.
Not to mention, there's a quote from Cassian. He says, quote, "You come between a male and his mate, Nesta Archeron, and you're going to learn about the consequences the hard way." Oh, the irony that he's literally saying that to his mate. I love it. We will learn in Silver Flames that Nesta views the mating bond as super fae. Like, what did Tamlin say about Calamai in book 1? But it's very fairy.
Yeah, very ... fairy.
Oh, he would have thought I'd be quoting a funny moment from Tamlin. But
your hair is clean.
My hair is clean right now. Thank you very much. But Nesta will continue to distance herself away from the mating bond. In this scene, Nesta even says, quote, "If you bring that male anywhere near here," I love that, like, male is in italics. It's almost like she's making, I know, I'm back on my italics bullshit, deal with it. Like, but it's almost like she's making fun of the Fae traditions and words and being like, ugh, God. Like I said earlier, she's not even showing her ears. Like, she is so not wanting to be fairy, and it's even more so in the mating bond.
She also considers Lucien part of the enemy, which he might be a little more complicated than that, but he was kind of there on Hybern's side when they were forced into the cauldron. Of course, there are major nuances there, but that's a hard first impression to come back from, especially for someone like Nesta. Fun fact I learned in my AP psychology class back in high school is that if you have a bad first impression, it takes 7 good impressions after that. Seven to rectify that bad first impression here. And I bet it's like 10 with Nesta.
Oh, yeah.
Feyre stresses the importance of choice regarding Elain and seeing Lucien, though. And while Nesta doesn't respond to this comment in particular, she soon enough dismisses Feyre with an, quote, "I don't care, do what you want," which is her way of saying, fine, I trust you enough to consider Elaine's needs first, too.
Later, after they get Lucien all situated in his new house of wind, Feyre wonders if Nesta has taken to guarding Elaine's door so that Lucien doesn't come in. And in this sense, I really do kind of feel bad for both sisters, but specifically Nesta. She has already been so protective over Elaine, like you've said earlier, Lex, but at least they were alone in the House of Wind when she was doing this. So there was that peace. I'm sure, you know, at night when like Cassian and Az come up to their rooms and stuff, but like during the day, it is them. It is only them. But now Lucien is here, this person who did have this role in them being thrown into the cauldron. He is now under the same roof. Their peace, or at least whatever semblance of peace they had, it has now been disrupted because her sister and her mate are letting this dude into their house. Like, I'd be pissed if I was Nesta.
I never thought of it that way, but that's actually a really good point.
Right? I would be livid if I would, like, I'd be like, I am trying to hold our sister together right now, and you bring this asshole in here. Are you serious? Now, please, that is me talking as Nesta. I love Lucien. So, but we also, as readers, we have all the context with Lucien. Nesta doesn't. Like, it's hard to remember that perspective sometimes. But then we head to the middle Archeron sisters' suite. And upon first glance, the suite itself is filled with so much sunlight. It's as much light as humanly possible, as if to chase any darkness away. God, this breaks my heart. Elaine's hair is down and undone. Feyre not even remembering the last time she saw it unbound. Elaine looks too pale, too thin. She looks hollow in her silk dressing robe, which, pause, we do not see Elaine outside of a gown. Like seeing her in a shift last book at the very end was like stark and startling. So seeing her just in a dressing robe is really surprising. And her eyes are described as, quote, grave dirt. Oh my God, that is brilliant description right there. Everything about this version of Elaine is the opposite of what we've known from her. Past Elaine was full of love, compassion, gentle sweetness. And Feyre even notes how she always considered Elaine as a different kind of strength because of those qualities. Yes, I eviscerated Elaine for those qualities in book 1. I'm coming around to having a different idea about it now. But it is very different from Nesta's harsh exterior strength. Quote from Feyre, "To look at the hardness of the world and choose over and over to love, to be kind. She had always been so full of light." There's that had, again, that language, that past tense. Feyre goes on to wonder why all of the curtains are open to let the sunlight in, is if it's like to fill the void that is now that darkness within Elaine. And I want to talk about the sunlight real quick because I got excited reading this. I love the thought of like Elaine, I almost look at her as like a flower. And what does a flower need to survive? It needs sunlight. What's the
photosynthesis? Sorry, we're not at a funny part right now, but I had to include that.
I also wonder, though, if this could be a little bit of a nod or even foreshadowing to the mating bond with Elaine and Lucien, or even them ending up in the day court, because it would be so poetic. Like everyone, including us, have talked about how, Elaine being so into flowers has been foreshadowing for her to go into the spring court. But what if her loving flowers so much as her being like a flower who needs sunlight to survive, aka going into the day court?
I love that idea.
I do too.
But now Feyre is seeing her beautiful and lively, happy sister become the shell. She feels like it's worse than Nesta's rage. And I can completely understand that. Like I would feel the exact same way.
Yeah. It is slightly ironic, I'll call it, that Feyre is so fearful of this void of emotion version of Elaine, because we can think back to ACOMAF, and this is not entirely far off from what Feyre was like. Now, did she have the same stark difference between how Elaine was versus how Elaine is now? Not necessarily. Feyre was a lot more of like that quiet strength, but especially given, like, for instance, how fearful Lucien is seeing this hollowness that has become Elaine. He didn't know her very well prior. We can think back to ACOMAF, where Rhys was just as fearful seeing Feyre, like, for instance, at their second bargain week for the Night Court, when she was vacant. And he was like,
Yep.
oh my God, this is terrifying. Like, poor Lucien. He's so in Rhys's footsteps here.
Well, and then remember when Elaine will later on be making bread, and it makes Feyre literally makes her heart swell. And Rhys says to her, like, that's how I felt when we were at that dinner and I could see you come alive again. So there really are those parallels there. All Elaine says is that she wants to go home, and it makes Feyre's chest unbearably tight. While she knows that this was Ianthe and the King of Hybern's doing, she also feels responsible for what happened to her sisters. She told Ianthe all about her sisters. She brought her sisters into the fold when she asked them to host the Mortal Queens. She was not able to stop the king's guards from forcing them into the cauldron. She had even said quietly to Nesta that she's sorry and meant it with her whole heart. And now she repeats that apology to Elaine, unable to say anything else. But Elaine, she makes the truthful comment that being sorry doesn't fix anything. And yeah, so often it doesn't. Especially when your life has been so unwillingly ripped away from you. Elaine was supposed to get married next week to Grayson, who will learn she met at his father's ball months ago and they fell in love. She says that he will be looking for her, which, by the way, before Jurian comes along to tell Grayson and his father the truth about what happened to Elaine, I bet he had been really concerned about her. She and Nesta straight up disappeared, and I wonder if the struggle that Nesta put up showed signs of a kidnapping. So yeah. Grayson's, oh my God, where did she go? Like, she was kidnapped, and then Jurian comes in and is like, well, let me tell you, actually. The guilt that Feyre feels for Elaine losing this future with her love, quote, I couldn't get enough air in. I couldn't breathe. Looking at this broken, carved out thing my sister had become, what I'd robbed her of, what I'd taken from her. Oh, that just sums up her guilt so sadly.
Well, if we're looking at that writing style that you just quoted, that's really similar to when Feyre was in the chimney and she was having a panic attack. So there's that anxiety style writing coming back in full swing.
Absolutely. I'm about to share a sad theory about Elaine, but before I do, it's important to give a trigger warning that this does involve a miscarriage. If you prefer to skip ahead a few minutes, I'm going to keep this short. Please do so to protect your peace. I completely understand. We know that Elaine lost her virginity to Grayson a month before she and Nesta were kidnapped. So this means it's about 2.5 months before the planned wedding. There is a theory that Elaine became pregnant after she slept with Grayson, but she lost the baby when she went into the cauldron. And this is a driving reason why she becomes a shell of herself in the weeks after turning Fae, because on top of everything else that has been taken from her, she also mourns the loss of her child. Based on the 1 month timeline, she would have just found out she was pregnant when she was forced into the cauldron. So Grayson or even Nesta did not know yet. It was Elaine's secret that she kept and just it festered away inside of her. Personally, I don't believe this heart-wrenching theory. Her trauma response is valid without the added tragedy of a miscarriage. It is absolutely valid for Elaine to mourn the life she was so excited about with the man she was head over heels in love with. Her world, her body, her mind, her future, her everything has been violated, and she is beyond lost now, a ghost of herself. Ultimately, she will need time to heal and adjust, get closure, as painful as it is from her perspective with Grayson. Plus, last thing I'll say about this theory is that we don't get any other hints that she had been pregnant. I feel inclined to believe that Feyre's pregnancy would have brought up her own trauma if she had been pregnant, but we don't get any subtleties that this is the case in Silver Flames. Again, that is me making an assumption that she would have felt something. And again, we don't have her POV, but I don't feel like that needs to have been true for Elaine to have gone through this trauma and terrible experience here. Yeah. More than anything, I think the reason SJM wrote in that she did lose her virginity was to heighten the connection she shared with Grayson, and that was the purpose of this. And when it is her turn for a POV and we get spicy scenes, Elaine will have already had at least one experience beforehand.
I agree with you completely. Is this theory heartbreaking? Could I see it? Yes, but normally with SJM style of writing, there's little hints and stuff that will prime us for that later. And either they're just going totally over our heads or we're not seeing them in the text. So, and I agree with you completely. That does not need to be part of her trauma journey in order to make it like this. So
yeah. Anyway, I figured I should address that theory. It's come up a whole lot. So I wanted to address that before I moved on.
Yeah. After the visit with the two Archeron sisters, it is time to show Lucien his new living quarters on the opposite side of the House of Wind. This is like when your boyfriend stays. Actually, I don't really know how much what mom and dad did with you and your boyfriend stay over, but they always made us sleep in separate rooms. Like there was no, I mean, like,
me too.
We sometimes
I think this happened like only once though, because I didn't really ever have boyfriends sleep over. Yeah. There was one time that Jake did stay the night, and the heat was cranked up so much that he and I and this was when we were older, so we were like in our mid-20s, so we were allowed to sleep in the same room, and like that was a big deal. Yeah. And it was so hot that we like couldn't even get near each other. And he was like, "I think your dad is doing this on purpose."
That's so fun, because Brett was also the only guy who was ever allowed. Like when we first started dating, I think he's just such a golden retriever that they were like, it's fine. Like, don't worry about it.
Also, it's because you're the little sister, and so I get the more strictness, and then by the time you come along, they're like, whatever.
Anyway, it's very similar of the boyfriend is staying the night and he is on the opposite end of the house. But until Feyre figures out what to do with her sisters and how to deal with Nesta and everything, Lucien's number one rule, his only rule for being allowed to stay in Velaris, is you have to stay out of their way. But he can go and explore Velaris. He can go explore the city below. Only if he climbs 10,000 steps, though. Like, he doesn't have wings. He can't winnow out of the house because there's the wards against not winnowing. So they're like, if you want to brave the stairs, you can go explore the city. And I'm like, you made this asshole climb 10,000 steps in order to go have a good time?
I mean, I will say he's capable of it. He is a trained warrior, so he could do it.
True. If I was staying somewhere and they were like, if you want to go out to dinner, you have to climb 10,000 stairs, I'd be like, fuck you. Like, that sucks. So naturally, Lucien asks if he's a prisoner here, because I would ask the same thing. Rhys almost opens his mouth to respond, which I imagine in that moment is something along the lines of, you mean how Feyre was a prisoner with you under your care in the Spring Court, which I'm glad Feyre cut him off, because I don't think that would have helped their relationship in the slightest. So instead, Rhys says, here are your rules. Basically, you cannot talk to the sisters. And if you disobey this rule, you will be locked in a room with Amren. Poor Lucien. Like, I would go completely stir crazy if there's a lot of stuff to do in the house. Yeah, sure. But he can't go to the library. He can't go to even like the house's like personal library, because that's on the sisters' floor. Like, he is confined. I mean, it's not that much different than he was in the Spring Court, actually, now that I mention it. Ooh, moving on. But I do have one quick question from the scene, though. Rhys is being very hospitable towards Lucien, offering him clothes, a place to stay, but he is not being nice in his tone. And finally, when Feyre chastises him down the bond, she realizes that something has really rattled Rhys enough where he's now needing to take the edge off of his anger, or internal anger, by taunting Lucien. So first off, again, poor fucking Lucien, my guy. He's really the punching bag of this series, and it really hurts my heart. But also, what rattled him? I'm guessing, was it Nesta acting rudely towards his mate and his best friend? Is it just the upcoming war? Because that small thing is, looming over their shoulders. Was it seeing Feyre so distraught by both of her sisters? What do you think rattled him so much?
I think it's D, all of the above.
Yeah, I think you're right. With Lucien being up in the House of Wind, he's not able to enjoy everything that Velaris has to offer, like shopping. But don't worry, Lucien. Shopify has taken the cash register online, helping millions sell billions around the world at retail stores, both online and in person.
Give your point of sale system a serious upgrade with Shopify, because your POS is your command center for your retail store. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify has everything you need to sell in store, online, on social media, and beyond. With Shopify, you get a powerhouse selling partner that unites your in-person and online sales into one source of truth. I love it. Track every sale across your business in one place and know exactly what's in stock.
With Shopify POS, you can accept credit cards, mobile payments, and every other major payment method, all with low fees and transparent pricing, starting on day one. Take customers from picking it out to picking it up. Shopify syncs in-store inventory with Google, so when local customers search for that one thing they want that you have, bam, you're there. Demand meets supply.
Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/FFG, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/FFG to take your retail business to the next level today. Shopify.com/FFG. The inner circle meets back at Amren's apartment, and in greeting, Amren tells Rhys he should kill Baron and his sons so Lucien, the handsome one, can be High Lord because, hey, that'll make life easier. Alrighty then, Amren, my goodness. But really, let's unpack this. Amren, we know, is ruthless. She is Rhys's second for a reason, beyond being a walking library. She is powerful, cunning, and strategic. When SJM was asked to sort ACOTAR characters into Hogwarts houses, she said she would say Slytherin, but Amren's actually the headmistress, which absolutely tracks. Her kind doesn't feel the same way that humans and Fae do. In her words, she was not designed that way. But her suggestion isn't far off from Cassian suggesting they assassinate the Mortal Queens last book. Everybody remember that. But Rhys's decline here, which is very polite, is also along the same lines as Feyre's reasoning for not letting Cassian and Azriel kill the Autumn Court sons back on the frozen lake. And it's because of the repercussions when they desperately need the Prythian courts to unite. Sure, Autumn Court being ruled by Lucien could be easier to bring the Autumn Court to the Night Court side, completely setting aside the fact that he probably couldn't be High Lord of the Autumn Court because he isn't Baron's son. That's a whole other discussion because actually, maybe he could be with his mother's heritage, but moving on. If they did this, that would further solidify that the Night Court is evil and willing to do anything for their own gain. I am on it with the SpongeBob references today.
Really are. I'm so proud.
Rhys and Feyre are focusing on holding out a hand to the other courts, offering to rebuild trust and have a united front against Hybern. Even though nobody likes Baron, one High Lord killing most of a family to install who they want, it's not a good look and does not encourage, trust and camaraderie like they need, which I will admit I'm a little surprised Amren is being short-sighted with that. But I also wonder if she isn't so much wearing the mask that the rest of the inner circle don. She doesn't have a mask. She is simply being her cold, cruel self. And she's all about gaining power for the greater good at whatever cost, teasing us for her proposal that Rhys become High King of Prythian in Silver Flames. So with Rhys politely dismissing her murder recommendation, let's walk through the current situation. It'll be hard enough for Prythian to survive Hybern's army of 100,000, and it will be impossible to survive if their continent allies join in the fight too. Valahan has the numbers, Montessor has the money, and Rask is big enough to have both. Well, shoot, that's not comforting. Meanwhile, Prythian, or should I say the Night Court / Court of Dreams, doesn't have any allies that would sail here to help. They've already searched for Miriam and Draken in hopes that they would come to their aid. But alas, Azriel went to Cretea, where Miriam and Draken have been with their unified human and Fae people, but the island looked abandoned and in ruin. More on this in a minute. So with Draken's aerial legion not a possibility, the Night Court has to focus on 3 things. Number 1, stop the rest of the continent territories from joining Hybern and sending even more armies here. Rhys and team have already been working on this. They're playing the continent territories off each other by planting information, truth and lies, and a blend of both for them to find so they can stay busy with each other instead of unite against Prythian. Information that makes them worried about being attacked, so they raise their own defenses instead of go on the offensive. Bottom line, the inner circle is ensuring that the continent territories are kept focused and fearful of each other so they don't bother with Prythian.
Which, can we pause for a minute? Because this is brilliant. But did they also just start a Cold War on the continent? And I'm talking about it like they talk about this like it's nothing, to the point that I forgot that this was even part of their plan. They started a fucking Cold War.
And then we don't hear anything else about it. Okay, number 2, they have to figure out how to fix the holes in the wall so the cauldron cannot exploit them and bring the wall down. Remember that the cauldron is not at full power because Nesta took from it. So it does not have the strength to destroy the wall. Yay! It needs to rely on the holes to bring the wall down. Simple solution is to fix the holes before this happens. And who better to fix the holes than someone forged by the cauldron's magic herself? That's where Nesta comes in. Feyre may have been made by the Seven High Lords, but Nesta is made directly from the cauldron, so she is most likely to bear the magic they need to patch up the wall. Lastly, for their plan, they need to unite the courts of Prythian. The Inner Circle needs allies in this war, so they need to persuade the courts to stand with them against Hybern and understand the consequences if they don't, which means invitations are being sent to every High Lord for a meeting in 2 weeks. As our crew is talking about this fast approaching war and the dangers of Hybern, we get a good glimpse into why Hybern is motivated to go to war in the first place. I discussed this in our ACOMAF episode 10, Surreal Tea Time, but it's been a few episodes, so let's summarize. For the last 500 years, Hybern's wealth has dwindled and they've had little trade or opportunity. Before the war, most of their trade routes dealt with the southern continent in what's called the Black Land. But then that territory went to the humans thanks to the treaty, and Hybern notably did not establish new trade routes, which was a big factor in its economic decline. And this fueled his people because for centuries, they've been festering in stagnation and poverty. Hybern's people are hungry for change back to the old days, which they call the Golden Era, back when they had human slaves to do their work and they knew privilege because they had human slaves. Now they consider the centuries since a, quote, dark age, where they've become isolated, poor, with no slaves to do their labor. All the while, the King of Hybern has been encouraging these limited world views. He's the one who didn't expand trade routes or allow other territories to take any of his lands and bring their cultures. I'll even argue to bring lesser fairies to replace the human slaves, as much as I hate saying that. He's been examining what went wrong for the Loyalists in that war 500 years ago. Remember, Hybern was part of the Loyalists who wanted to keep things the way that they were. They ultimately yielded not because the Loyalists were overwhelmed, but because they began arguing among themselves. He won't make that same mistake again. So the King of Hybern has been focused on uniting his people against a common enemy. Quote, Hybern's people see their king and their armies not as conquerors, but as liberators of High Fae and those who stand with them. Folks, that is very dangerous, as we unfortunately know here in the real world. Hybern plans to make Prythian an example of what happens to High Fae territories who defend the treaty. Plus, defeating Prythian clears the way to the continent. Because unfortunately, too many on the continent want their old lands back from the mortals and the power and prosperity that come with it. Hence why the Inner Circle is focused on distracting the continent territories from uniting under this common goal.
Let's go back to that Miriam and Draken mention, because we can always use a refresher when it comes to Miriam and Draken and Jurian and all of them. The last war 500 years ago, Draken allied with the side of the humans / the Fae on the human side with his legion of aerial seraphim. Think of the seraphim as Fae with large feathered wings, like almost like angels, basically, if we're looking for a visual. And them joining that side was quite a turning point for the war. So why not have them join this time around, Feyre asks, especially since technically they owe Rhys a debt for fighting for them centuries ago. Rhys also went into a suicide mission in Draken's place last war that resulted in him getting captured by Amarantha. So they owe them, goodness. But the Inner Circle is one step ahead of our girl Feyre. Asriel, it turns out, already went to Kretea, the island where Miriam and Draken and all of their people have secretly lived for 500 years. Remember, everyone else thinks that Miriam, Draken, and the rest of them are dead. But it was an abandoned and completely in ruin. What happened? They don't think it was Hybern that completely destroyed is in air quotes right now, the island. They also don't think that they ran because of the looming threat. However, Jurian is the wild card here, because they might have caught wind that Jurian is hunting them and ran because of that one human and evacuating their entire island and leaving it in ruins. But as we know from later on in this book, the island itself is actually not evacuated, and it is most definitely not in ruins. It is all a glamour, a really well-working glamour.
We will later learn that this is a very powerful spell Draken and Miriam cast to stay hidden, and they will realize, oops, it worked too well and kept friends like the Night Court away as well as enemies. But of course, our inner circle doesn't know that yet, and they're worried about their long-lost friends who seem to disappear without a trace. They don't think Miriam and Draken would run from danger like you were saying, but they do understand they might have to avoid being hunted by Jurian. Speaking of Miriam, we get a very interesting bit of information about her. We have known that she is half fae, half human, and died, but was resurrected and made by an item from the cauldron. Here we get more details about that incident. A spear went through her chest during the last battle at sea, and she bled out and died while she was carried to safety. But Draken knew of a sacred hidden island, Kratea, where an object of great and terrible power had been concealed. This was an object made by the cauldron itself, as legend claimed, which I believe makes it a dread trove, because dread trove by definition are items made by the cauldron. Correct. Though this item doesn't seem to be one of the known ones in our story. Draken used this powerful cauldron-made object to resurrect Miriam, and in the process, she also turned immortal, but she still has her same half-fae, half-human body. There is a lot of speculation about what this object is, and the truth is, we don't have enough information to make any concrete guesses. Let's walk through the known 4 dread trove items. First, we have the crown, which was found by Brialyn, who is the young mortal queen turned immortal, crowned by the cauldron with the help of Beren. So location-wise, it could very well have been this one. And again, we don't know like if this item is still on Kratea, which would really bring up some serious questions, but again, we're just speculating here. However, the crown doesn't resurrect. That's not its power. It controls minds. So I'm willing to bet that means that this is not it. The harp has been hidden deep in the prison for thousands and thousands of years. So it was not on this island. And then we have the mask, which would seem the most likely because it literally can resurrect people. Now, of course, in different ways, it's more like animating the dead. But anyway, it has been in a lake in the middle, so same as the harp, I would imagine that it wouldn't have been found on this island.
Not to mention using the mask is like a huge deal. Like Amren was like, you used it and lived. And I love our guy Draken. I don't know if he's of the same power as Nesta. But I will say, because yes, I do agree that the mask is the most obvious answer. I do wonder if it was on Kratea and then Draken threw it into the lake.
So I went back through and I reread this part of Silver Flames, trying to find any hints of like how long the mask had been in that lake. I couldn't find anything. Okay. That would have been a very long way for Draken to travel from Kratea with a newly resurrected mate who just almost died, who did die, and then putting it in the middle and then going back. Like, I don't see that happening there.
We're too efficient for that to make sense.
And lastly, we have a mysterious 4th object made of age-worn bone. That's all we know here from Nesta's vision that Lanthis projected into her mind. I'm saying is that we know for a fact that it is not that one, and that's all I can say when we're not in Mass vs. Madness. My guess is that it's a different cauldron-made object we have not encountered yet, and it is not one of these known 4 objects, or 3 objects technically, because the 4th one is this mysterious one that we will later find out about in Massverse. And technically it is kind of known because they're talking about it right here. Not really known because it's never mentioned again.
But then there's also Narbin, which is a known made object that was thrown in the sea by Amarantha, but that's a weapon.
Correct.
Cauldron boil me!
I think this is more convenience, and I would hope that it might come up later on, and Kratea might be a key to something. I don't know.
Oh, no. I could see like a novella, like especially like a more POV novella, like Kratea being a bigger part of that. And then maybe we'll get some answers.
Well, it's so interesting because Miriam and Draken, like they're not on the pages here until the very end. And so it's like, is their story's purpose for the big reveal when they come in and help save the day in the battle? Or is there something even bigger within this multi-world universe that SJM has created?
I don't know.
During this whole conversation about the war and their plans and Miriam and such, we start to really see Feyre having to figure out how to balance being High Lady and a family member to the inner circle. Like when she is refusing to risk her sister's safety by helping patch up the wall, Amren snorts, "You sound exactly like Tamlin." Wow, Amren, that's a low blow. more certainly thinks so because she immediately comes to Feyre's defense. In fact, Feyre thinks to herself that she's never seen Mor look so angry, and she demands that Amren apologize, which, of course, that's not Amren's style. But Amren's words, harsh as they may have been, are a wake-up call to Feyre, because last book, she insisted on having the choice to help, to risk herself. And she realizes that her sisters deserve the same choice, that she can't just shield them from danger if they're able and willing to help.
Yeah, this is a low blow. L for Amren. Capital L, not okay. And this is some Tamlin way of thinking, like you just said, with not giving them the choice and protecting them. But also, I will say, not doing the hard, uncomfortable thing. That is what Tamlin is kind of known for. But I will give Feyre a huge benefit of the doubt here because unlike Tamlin, Feyre is offering up herself as the person to do it instead, while Tamlin just buried his head in the sand and called it a day. So ultimately, I do agree with Amren. That is not the way to get her to agree, though. Like, that was fucked up, in my opinion. The entire island of Prythian does need help from the Archeron sisters, though, in order to save hundreds of thousands of lives, and also not to even to mention the lives of the human realm as well. So of course the smart thing is to get the Archeron sisters to help save hundreds of thousands of lives, and not the way to do it. Bad, Amren. What do you say? B's bad.
Well, it's a element of not being able to force them, right? And Amren is kind of like I don't care what we have to do. We have to make them do it. And Feyre is like, okay, hold your horses here. That's where I really do think that Feyre will continue adjusting to this balance of High Lady and family member throughout the rest of the series, but I do have to give it to her in this moment. She gives a very mature response. She doesn't chastise either Amren or Mor or even make a big deal out of their argument, but she also acknowledges that Amren is right, showing that she can accept advice and recognize when she's being closed-minded. While at the same time, she doesn't just fold completely to Amren, she presents this as a choice for her sisters instead of, insistence and forcing it upon them, which is a compromise with Amren, who most certainly does want to force them. Amren taking some L's in the scene, even if she is right.
Oh, you can be right, but your method of trying to get to right can be wildly wrong.
Yes.
And that is exactly what happens. But the tension does not stop there because Rhys, in typical Rhys fashion, being his jokey self, says, quote, I'm not entirely sure Velaris is prepared for Nesta Archeron. Which, quick side note, when Feyre is telling Rhys when he's got his ash arrows in his wings last book about Nesta and Elain, she mentions how Nesta would actually probably really like Velaris despite herself. But in this moment, Feyre snaps back at Rhys saying, quote, my sister's not some feral animal. And Rhys recoils. Side note, it is so relatable how everyone in the room suddenly finds anything else to look at, like the carpet, the divan, the bookshelf, anything else is fascinating all of a sudden. Because whenever you're in a group and the energy is, light or even semi-light, and then someone snaps, it almost your fight or flight goes off and you're like, oh my God. In these moments, I'd rather launch myself into a lake than make eye contact with anyone close to me. Why did Feyre snap at Rhys like this in this moment? Because this is wildly different than we've ever seen Rhys and Feyre act towards each other. Sure, they've been playful, they've fought in the past, and no one's really blinked an eye. But honestly, they probably would have hopped in the joke, if anything. And they fought before, but in private, on the mountaintop right after the Court of Nightmares last book. This is the first time it was a joke and it was hey, that's not okay, which is a different type of tension than a fight. Feyre noticed the difference in how Rhys treated Elain versus Nesta earlier. Rhys is also still angry and holds quite a bit of disdain towards Nesta and how she treated Feyre in poverty. Now, yes, we know that Elain treated her the same way. Through having 7 really good reactions with Elain, he's kind of forgiven her in that way. But in also Rhys's defense, he sees how Nesta treats Feyre now versus how Nesta treats Elain now. Nesta is not his favorite, long story short. But at the end of the day, Nesta is still Feyre's sister, who she loves, and she would do anything for her. If anyone said anything, I don't care if we were in the fight of a century, Lex, if someone said something bad about you when we were in a fight, I would still be like, whoa, like you cannot say that about my sister, because there is that
same thing. Yeah.
Like there's that connection, there's that kinship. Like no matter how mad I am at you, like which I actually don't really think I've ever been like that, but like if
I was just thinking, it's like, I don't think we've ever been in this situation.
God, knock on wood. Knock on wood. We have contracts together now. But if God forbid, if that ever did happen, like someone could say something terrible about you, I would defend your honor. Like,
yeah, like whenever I say Farrah and you're like, and you're always not allowed to say anything, which by the way, thank you everybody for your support.
I have maybe snapped back at a few people on the internet for attacking my sister because it makes me sad because you're amazing. Anyway, there's quite a bit of awkwardness in this tension between these two lovebirds for the rest of the day after Feyre snaps. So much so that Cassian even offers to carry Feyre after their meeting at Amren's. Again, this is just another instance of Cassian's emotional intelligence / like being able to read what people need. It's just on full display in the scene because he uses the excuse of like, I need the extra weight to strengthen my wings. But he also knows that like there's some tension between Feyre and Rhys right now. And he's like, I think let's give him an extra minute. So he offers to carry her. For the next few hours, things do continue to be awkward, and not in a like they're mad at each other way, but more of like we're wary around each other. Like we don't really know where we stand. And this is so relatable in, I'll say almost every relationship, because there's the unicorns out there, but I know at least in mine, there are growing pains that sometimes include snapping or uncomfortable conversations. I think that's a really good way of describing it. And I love that Feyre describes herself as feeling almost queasy in the wake of that awkwardness. I can think of many moments when Brett and I first started dating. And like, honestly, we just didn't really know how to fight or have those difficult conversations where we felt like we were like walking on eggshells with each other until we finally needed to like sit down and have a vulnerable conversation with each other. But it was almost like I was sick to my stomach in the lead up to it. Like, you know, when you get a text and it's like, we need to talk. Like it's one of the, oh God, please never send those texts, people. It's the worst. I hate it. But it's not because it's bad, but it's more of just like, it feels uncomfortable and uncertain. You don't know where you stand, which our lovebirds do finally have a talk later. I know we're jumping ahead a little bit, but as they walk through the Sidra at night in Velaris, Feyre will tell Rhys that she's sorry she undermined him in front of their friends. And Rhys is like, what are you talking? I thought you were mad because I insulted your sister. Like, are you serious? And he's actually surprised to hear that this is her reasoning, which Feyre says, quote, I get it though. A solid unified front is more important.
Oh boy.
More
just keeps popping up.
Stupid. Like it makes so much sense. But like the Tamlin trauma resurfaces again. And given that Feyre does not know a relationship other than Tamlin and Rhys, I'm not including Isaac, average sex lover extraordinaire here because he was a fuck buddy. Like
I agree with you, but never forget you, Isaac.
It does make sense that this is her default way of thinking. And Feyre is still learning how to become High Lady and Rhys's equal, and we'll talk more about that later. The fact that this did not even cross Rhys's mind that it might be like the weirdness between them is because she undermined him. It just shows how much he views her as an equal. So in the scene, Rhys actually stays quiet and he lets her talk out how she's feeling in how she wants to make decisions together with her partner and how they want to challenge each other going forward. Which, pause, because yes, this is my favorite thing about someone. It does not need to be a partner. It can be a friend. It can be a family member. It can be whoever. But when they just like, when they see that you need to just verbally process and they just like allow you to be quiet. Brett and I have a shorthand for this is like, it's whenever, you know, we're kind of showing like needing to verbally process, we ask each other, we say, what do you need? Which means, do you need to talk this out on your own and just have maybe a backboard for me to listen to you? Do you need someone to problem solve with you? Or do you need me to verbally validate you? Like, what do you need of those three options? And it is,
we have like exact,
thing,
almost,
right?
yeah, we have the exact same thing too, where we call it like solution mode instead of problem solving. But yeah, Jake even approached me about a topic and was like, I'm not looking for solution mode right now. I just need to talk this out. Yeah. And we had a wonderful 2-hour conversation.
Wow. Yeah. But like that right there, it cuts through. So like when I say learn how to fight earlier, learn how to have those vulnerable conversations, that's like what I'm talking about here. And that's why I love Rhys so much, is because in the scene, he just does that. And God, this is why he's my number one book boyfriend. I love him. But Feyre comes to the decision that no matter what, I will not undermine you in public and you will not undermine me. It's not one way, it's a two-way street. And I do love that it's both ways because partnership and teamwork, that's what they're about here. And Rhys adds that among family, she can call him out whenever she wants. Note that I love he uses the term call him out rather than undermine, because call him out is much more equal than undermine makes him sound like he's above her.
Yep.
And he says this is the reason, quote, because you're my equal. And as much as that means having each other's backs in public, it also means we can grant each other the gift of honesty. This is right here what Feyre needed to hear to override that Tamlin trauma, really. She is not used to being an equal with a partner, which is why next episode when they go to the Court of Nightmares and she sits on the throne and he like leans on the throne next to her, that is such a huge moment for her and her confidence as High Lady. But wow, back to the scene at Amren's. Rhys has one more announcement to make. Starting tomorrow, invites will go out to all the High Lords of Prythian for the meeting in 2 weeks' time to discuss the war. This is yet another moment of our story where Rhys is making decisions without counsel, which is priming us for next episode when we go to the Court of Nightmares. And he does this exact same thing with dramatic consequences with Mor and Keir. In the scene at Amren's, this is the first time we really have the whole family back together. And unlike Akamath, tensions are really high and they're very different in this scene. And while sometimes, it's like the tease each other tension, like how Rhys was goading Cassian into a temper because he knows he feels guilty about Nesta and everything what happened there. But there's a lot more examples of them being quite angsty towards each other and hiding things from each other, like how Feyre will later hide that she's going to the Bone Carver from Amren, which you can chalk it up to like, oh, that's family, right? And especially this family that is so comfortable with each other, it makes sense that they snap at each other much easier because there is that unconditional love. But this is also a situation where the stakes are so high. And it's also bringing up old memories of 500 years ago where they were torn apart by basically this very war. But this time they are trying to do things differently and learn from last war's mistakes, which means a lot more verbal communication and a lot more pressure that they're putting themselves under. Not to mention, one of their own was just in enemy's hands for 50 years. We as readers do not know what it was like when Rhys was under the mountain, but I would imagine that between the family, it was a very similar energy given that's again, the stakes were so high and the tension was so high.
While flying to the House of Wind for dinner, Cassian and Feyre's conversation turns to Nesta. So let's talk about the dynamic between her and Cassian because wow, the foreshadowing is just so strong here. We've already had them go toe-to-toe last book and Cassian promised Nesta he would protect her. They are clearly drawn to one another and Cassian tends to be someone who wears his emotions on his sleeve while Nesta is the opposite. So you can see all these little signs of how he's intrigued by her. And now since she became Fae, he is so worried about her and trying to hold out his hand, metaphorically speaking, as he will do time and time again in Silver Flames. He taunts her to bring out the emotion, not unlike Rhys did with Feyre, but in a more obvious, upfront kind of way because he and Nesta have such, I'll say, seemingly polarizing personalities and attitudes towards people in life. So it's just like a lot more in your face. Oh my God, I just can't wait to get to Silver Flames and talk all about them. Cassian has been checking in on her at the House of Wind every other day, claiming it's good exercise for his wings. But come on, we all know the real reason why he goes up there. He's explained that what Feyre saw in the library was a pleasanter version of the conversation they always have. He wants Nesta to start training, to have a purpose and a goal beyond guarding Elaine, to get her out of the house, and to help her build the skills she needs with this oncoming war. Cassian is a physical person. Yeah, he is. Where training is a very effective outlet to work through his emotions and manage trauma. He identifies this in Nesta too and wants to help her on her own healing journey. But also, Cassian feels immense guilt for what happened to Nesta and Elaine. He promised Nesta he would protect her and her sister, and according to him, he failed. It doesn't matter that his wings were shredded and he physically couldn't. He was on the brink of death. He had been trying to crawl toward her, quote, reaching for her even in the semi-unconscious state the pain and blood loss had thrown him into, as Rhysand had once done for me during those last moments with Amarantha. Everybody remember, this was the moment that Rhys realized that Feyre was his mate. And then how Cassian says he can't stay away, just like Rhys has felt toward Feyre. The parallels of the mates are just so literally just right there on the page here. Cassian will later reflect that he suspected he and Nesta were mates when he first met her way back last book. So yes, he was literally crawling toward his mate, trying to protect her, even if it wasn't like crystal clear as to why. Again, he suspected it, but he didn't know it yet. As far as he's concerned, when Nesta needed him most, Cassian did not uphold his promise to her, and it is eating away at him to the point where the rest of his family is helping him through this guilt in the way that they know how. Now that she is in Velaris, he is doing everything in his power to make it up to her by letting her know every other day when he visits her. He's getting a rise out of her. He's pushing her to train. That he is essentially saying, I am here and I will always be here for you, and I'm sorry.
At Amren's, though, Cassian was vaguely talking about Nesta, and Mor is pressing her lips into a line as if she's trying not to say anything, all the while Azriel is shooting Mor with a warning glare. And Feyre takes it that they've had this conversation around Nesta, maybe not this quiet, many times, which, yes, they probably have. Mor cares deeply for Cassian, and from her POV, it does look like he is falling for a girl who is treating him terribly. Now, there's also their history, Mor and Cassian's history, that we've discussed, where she likes him being a buffer between her and Azriel, and right now it might feel like that dynamic is being threatened in their group because Cassian's focus is now elsewhere. But Azriel wanting Mor to drop it is really interesting, given the fact that he also deeply cares for his brother and obviously would not want him to be treated poorly. I do wonder if Azriel has sensed the mating bond between them, or is just observant enough to assume that, now it doesn't have to necessarily be mates, but like he knows that something deeper is going on here.
Oh, definitely. Even if Feyre can recognize it, you know that Azriel's already there.
No, it's so real, though. I mean, he's a shadow singer, absolutely. He knows that this is Cassian's problem, though, to solve. This is not Mor's. And he's kind of looking at more of like, stop fucking meddling. Let him figure this out for himself. But in this conversation with Cassian and Feyre, we really see how much Cassian specifically understands Nesta so much deeper. He knows she's not just being a bitch or a bitter bitch. Like, he knows that there is so much more going on here. He told the group at Amren's that he does not blame her for being unpleasant to anyone because, quote, she was violated. Her body stopped belonging wholly to her. Everyone is pretty quick to blame Nesta, and I'm not excluding us readers. We are as well, for being a bitch. Like, let's be real. But Cassian sees that her attitude is so much more about her and how she sees herself than it is about them and how she views them. Even though Feyre is protective and she is making decisions for her sister's well-being, we really see how much more Cassian understands the core Nesta in these scenes. There is one thing, however, in this conversation between Cassian and Feyre that they can agree on, and that is Nesta's powers are something else entirely. And quick pause, because I love that it is Cassian and Feyre, not the inner circle as a whole, having this conversation, because they're able to have this in a judgment-free way. Quote, it was like everything she was, that steel and fire, it became magnified, cataclysmic, like looking at a house cat and suddenly finding a panther standing there instead. Yes, I love this. We have been primed that this version of Nesta lives beneath the surface from freaking day one of this book, literally chapter, I think, 2. And I'll even go down to like the flames on her dresser drawer. We know as readers of this whole series that Nesta was very changed in the Cauldron, and she did come out something completely new to this world. And I feel like we're still just getting the scratch of the surface of what her powers actually are. And while we are still figuring them out, we do know that the silver fire and power over death, it's only part of it. So no wonder they're like, what's going on with that girl? It's incredible. I love that they're already starting to see it.
Who's ready for another dining room scene?
The amount of dining room scenes I think every other scene in this stretch of chapters is in the dining room. I do love really quick that Lucien shows up like in his finest, and he's just trying to make a good first impression. Like, first is in quotations there, but just like Feyre at her first dinner at the House of Wind, when she dressed up and she like looked all fancy. Oh, they're just two peas, these two.
It illustrates more of that stark difference between the Night Court and the Spring Court. We can't say it enough. It is far more relaxed here in the Night Court, where they can wear whatever they are most comfortable in. And it's quite eye-opening eye-opening for Lucien, who is like, so what's the dress code? Feyre is no longer in the spring court dresses she wore as part of her innocent mask either. She's back in her Illyrian leather pants and a loose white shirt, comfort over anything else right now as she settles back into being home with her family and embracing exactly who she is. She loves her pants and shirts, and she also loves the dresses when she feels like wearing them.
I love the moment where Lucian's like, Rhys, shouldn't you sit at the head of the table? And Rhys is like, I'm hungry, sit down. Lucien in the Night Court is in such culture shock right now because he is, quite frankly, if we're boiling it down, like he is not used to being around a family, which just breaks my freaking heart. Also, a quick wing watch. Later, Feyre will recognize that Rhys had his wings out in the scene. Now, this is the second time he's had his wings out to Lucien, but the previous one, his wings like angry ripped out from his back. This is just them at peace chilling, which is signs that he is starting to trust Lucien in a way. We'll talk more about that in a moment. But after a day of reflecting on his new situation, Lucien begins to really accept that Feyre did choose the Night Court over Spring. Lucien says, quote, I get that we were not what you wanted or needed. How small and isolated our home must have been for you once you saw this. Quick question. Do you think that Lucien's speaking from experience here? Like he saw Velaris and he now considers Spring to be small and isolated?
Maybe in a subconscious way. Feyre did say to him that she knows he's meant for bigger things in the Spring Court. And it's like he can identify what she really does mean now that he's here and how much bigger the world is and what his purpose could be within it. Not necessarily in Velaris itself, but Velaris represents that bigger world and opportunities that Lucien is really seeing for the first time.
Agreed completely, yes. Now, Lucien and Tamlin and the Spring Court as a whole were what Feyre needed and wanted back in book 1. As we discussed at length, she needed to know what safety, comfort, creativity, basically what it was like to live outside of survival mode. But then, ironically, she died under the mountain and came back a truly different person. Then it wasn't safety and comfort that she needed. She needed freedom, life, vibrancy, and family. And one day, that is all it took for Lucien to realize and come to terms with, oh, this is actually what Feyre needs. Like, that is the power of Velaris.
Well, let's get into Nesta and Mor. Oh, boy. Despite Mor's personal feelings about Nesta, I sincerely applaud her effort here. She gets an A for effort.
Absolutely. Mor starts off complimenting Nesta's dress. I do think that she saw how Feyre snapped at Rhys earlier and thought, okay, I can give Nesta the benefit of the doubt. Let me try to welcome her into the family. Just as Mor was the gateway for Feyre last book getting into the family. I think that Mor saw that they had, for the most part, made a negative opinion about Nesta, and it did hurt Feyre. So this is her trying to extend a hand, for lack of a better term. But it doesn't go over very well because Nesta says, fortunately for you, I don't return the sentiment. Oh, dear. Ouch. Oh, gosh.
Oh, Nesta.
L.
I don't think we've officially given her an L, but yeah, she needs an L right here. She needs an L.
Have we seriously not given Nesta an? We should have.
I think it's just been like a continual L, but also like again,
it's so hard. That's the dichotomy of Nesta, but. Nesta is so used to having a harsh exterior and pushing everyone away. And it makes sense. It's her default. That is not explaining away the L. That's just from her POV. But I think that she realized that she was super rude when Mor and Cassian were like, okay, we're going to need more wine for this. And her back stiffens. It's almost like, oh, oops, like I realized what I did there. You could read this as her building up more and more walls because that is a similar language. But I think it's more of like, it's almost like an embarrassment of like, oh, I fucked up.
Interesting. I think that these two feelings can go hand in hand for Nesta. It's not too often that she is called out on her rudeness, and when it happens, she usually digs her heels in deeper and solidifies those walls. She's rude, which make people judge her, which makes her more distant, which has her leveraging that rudeness as her barrier against these people, and it's a cycle that she's trapped herself in. So I don't see her being, I'll say, embarrassed by it or consciously embarrassed by it. But I do think it is just like her reaction to people judging her, which is how she's taking that. And then her just putting those walls up there. Nesta also just doesn't like Mor. And while you could argue she doesn't like most people, she particularly doesn't like Mor. Mor is a bright light of sunshine, but she's also a strong warrior and a powerful political player. In many ways, she is everything that Nesta isn't. She has this inner confidence that she exudes, which is what drew Feyre to her, but has the opposite effect for Nesta. One of my favorite things about Silver Flames is that Nesta can be nice and friendly to people, but she has to choose her own found family. This family is kind of thrust upon her, once again taking control away from her. Feyre had the chance to get to know the Inner Circle more or less on her own terms, but Nesta is welcomed and protected here because of her sister, for the most part. I know I'm painting broad strokes here. And we go back to that competition with Feyre and how Nesta is losing. Bottom line, she does not want to be a charity case. That is literally the last thing she would ever want. Mor's compliment and general niceness to her feels like that, a charity case toward Nesta, aka Feyre's sister. If Nesta met Mor on her own terms, I think they could have been friends. But at the same time, one of the beautiful things about Nesta's future found family in Gwen and Emery is that they are all on their own healing journeys too. All three of them are messy and figuring things out together. Mor, even though she still has her hard days, is essentially on the other side of that healing journey, becoming one more thing for Nesta to compare herself to and come up short.
Later during dinner, Nesta will offer up, I'll call it a metaphorical olive branch. She will say to Feyre that she understands what Feyre meant about the food. And after a what the fuck are you talking about moment internally from Feyre, she remembers back in the mortal realm and that dinner many moons ago that she had with her sisters, her and Nesta, I won't say got into a fight, but got into a sister cat fight, about which food tasted better, mortals versus Prythian, because Nesta thought that Feyre was being all high and mighty. Turns out that Nesta does now agree that Prythian is better. But this isn't just friendly dinner conversation. Personally, I took this as her realizing earlier, okay, maybe that was a little rude to Mor. She was giving me a compliment, so let me offer one up in return to this family, which is something that Nesta does not do. Nesta is, like Lucien, outside of her comfort zone. And while I do not support her being rude to her everyone, she is trying to figure out how she works in this new family. And she's really throwing spaghetti at the wall, it feels like.
Yep.
Which, by the way, I was talking to one of our mods who's Canadian last night, and they were saying, they're like, what do you mean when you're talking about spaghetti at the wall? What is that saying? And I'm like, when you're trying to see if spaghetti's done, you throw it at the wall and see if it sticks. And if it sticks, it's done. Now, I've not done this in years, and the Italians listening are probably about to flay me. But it's a saying primarily in America to throw ideas and see what sticks at the wall. Shouts to you, Spiral, who was horrified after I told them this. So.
I agree with you about how she's trying to figure out how she works within this life. But I will say I don't feel like she cares that much about her comment to Mor and making up for it. Yes, definitely extending an olive branch to Feyre because she really does love her sister and is trying her best in her own way here, which might be why this is so specifically targeted at Feyre. It's something the two of them kind of share here, and it's actually excluding Mor and the others.
Later, Feyre will notice how Nesta is starting to stare at her plate, and Feyre thinks that she's just trying to ignore the others. But apparently I'm really on the Nesta hype train today. I disagree in this moment. She's not ignoring them, but instead I think she's shying away from this display of family just blatantly right in front of her. She has never been in a family and around a family. Yeah. And instead of being embrace me in your arms, she's I feel like an outsider, so I'm just going to stare at my plate.
Mor asks Nesta where her dress is from. And you know where Mor really needs to start shopping? Quince. Leading up to LeakyCon, I was stressing out about what I was going to wear. It was one of those moments where I felt like I needed a real wardrobe refresh. Enter Quince. It's my go-to for high-quality vacation essentials that I'll be packing for trips to come.
Yes, I love Quince. I'm wearing my Quince shirt right now. They have everything from European linen dresses, blouses, and shorts from $30, washable silk tops, premium luggage options, and so much more. The best part, all Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. By partnering directly with top factories, Quince cuts out the cost of the middleman and passes the savings on to us. And Quince only works with factories that use safe safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices and premium fabrics and finishes. I love it!
I am obsessed with my Quince leggings. Like, they're so buttery soft, and I just love touching them. Very
Can
much.
confirm, I have also touched them. They're so comfortable.
Yes, and my shorts, like, oh my gosh, when we were not on the LeakyCon floor, I was wearing my shorts all the time in our hotel because they're just so comfortable.
If you saw me in any of our LeakyCon stuff in those black shorts, those are my Quince shorts that I love so much that I wore probably more than a person should. Pack your bags with high quality essentials from Quince. Go to quince.com/FFG for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That is QUINCE.com/FFG to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/FFG. After insulting Mor, Nesta turns to Amren and asks her why her eyes glow. And everyone's like, ah! But I love that there is no fear in Nesta. Remember, Nesta and the rest of the Archerons, they grew up knowing about the Fae. They have been primed to fear everything and everyone above the wall. And Amren is one of the scariest of them all. This is a big deal for Nesta to just be like, so why do your eyes glow?
I love Nesta's genuine curiosity. She is a person who is very selective with her words. And when she asks questions, that in and of itself is a big deal, showing her interest. When she's someone who tries so hard to show that she's not interested most of the time. But hey, there's that Ravenclaw shining through where she really is innately curious.
I thought you were dying on the hill that she was a Slytherin. I liked the fact that she was a Ravenclaw.
Well, yeah, and then Sarah J. Maas said that she was a Ravenclaw, so now that's obviously canon, so I have accepted that she's a Ravenclaw.
Wow. Wow. Not to mention, this is such a callback from Feyre in Akamath when she said to Rhys that she thinks that Amren and Nesta would be fast friends. Amren answers that they glow because, quote, it was the one part of me the containment spell could not quite get right. The one glimpse into what lurks beneath. And Nesta, still not afraid. It's like, what's beneath? Continue.
And she's asking her another question no one else here has asked her because they're too scared and it's considered impolite. I just love this so much. It is so on brand for Nesta to be the one to ask this question because no one else would because they're too afraid and it's impolite. Like, check the boxes.
And I love that Lucian's just like white as a sheet. He's like, this is how I die. Oh my God. Like, he's accepted his fate. But Amren doesn't really answer this part of the question. Instead, she tells Nesta that they are not that different. Not in being the same species, but instead, she says, quote, you do not fit the mold they shoved you into, the path you were born upon and forced to walk. You tried, and yet you could not fit. And then the path changed. This is delicious. I love this shit. Okay. So much to unpack here. Number one, as we learn in Silver Flames, Nesta grew up believing that she was going to be the political player of the family. As the oldest, she would marry for gain rather than love, which we can gather that Nesta is going to play a political part of this series, but it's not from being a square peg trying to be shoved into a round hole. It's about her finding her place in this world. Number two, she was also put into a box that needed to be emotionless and protects herself from the rest of the world. And in Silver Flames, she learns that is not the only way. And number three, we will learn that her path changes in many different ways. Right here, yes, it seems like it is becoming Fae, but also becoming a Valkyrie and a warrior, going through her entire journey that have you noticed we can't wait to talk about Silver Flames? And also all of the queen language that's being used in this book. We wonder if Nessa's story is not even quite near done yet, given the fact that she is being primed for foreshadowing wise to be, whether that's High Queen or whether that's a High Lady, we don't know. But Amren knows it. And she says, quote, when you erupt, girl, make sure it is felt across worlds. I'll be talking about this later.
And number four, I feel like it also reflects that there's nothing necessarily wrong with Nesta, as Cassian will assure her in Silver Flames during an iconic moment. But she still doesn't fit the mold in society. She is rude and cold and misunderstood by almost everyone around her. Additionally, we can't forget that she is made differently in that Tamlin's glamour didn't work on her. This is a little nod to that. She has been so much more than a mere human, and she is so much more than a high fae too. She is bound for greatness. I could write a whole dissertation on Nesta. Let's jump back to Lucien because he asks, quote, "Can I offer my unsolicited advice?" as they're talking about the High Lord meeting. And first of all, I love how Rhys is like, that's the first time anyone here has ever asked that. It's a nice little nod to Lucien's courtly manners and experience as an emissary in a formal setting. Meanwhile, Mor and Cassian are literally sticking out their tongues at him. We've discussed how Lucien is in an awkward place here and doesn't really know his role. No one here quite knows it yet. He's not one of them by any means, but he's also not a prisoner. He's just there. So he's taking it upon himself to be useful and, for lack of a better word, prove himself. It's his nature to give advice, and he's damn good at it, especially when it comes to the other courts, and especially when it comes to his father and Tamlin, 2 of the 7 High Lords. Lucien asks about whether they plan on revealing Feyre's powers, which she received from each of the 7 High Lords. Rhys's reply has a bit of a bite to it, which I think is in part because back in the Spring Court after Under the Mountain, Tamlin, and by association Lucien, made her powers out to be a bad thing, that they'd have to keep hidden like it was a dirty thing she stole. Yes, their reasoning was to protect her. And yes, Lucien tried to convince Tamlin to at least train her in secret. But the fact remains that while Rhys was saying she should be a weapon and own her powers, Lucien was on the other side and saying, nope, you need to hide them away at the risk of being hunted down and killed. He says as much here, quote, "My father would likely join with Hybern if he thought he stood a chance of getting his power back that way, by killing you. But instead of saying what Feyre should do in this meeting, he takes a smarter, more strategic approach. Find out what Barron already knows, since the Autumn Court Bros will have seen her powers and may have already told Barron, and then plan accordingly from there."
This conversation in and of itself is a huge step forward for Lucien and Rhys. Lucien is smart. He is calculating. He is someone who thinks 12 steps ahead, which is why I 1000% agree with Rhys later when he's talking to Feyre and he says Lucien's talents were wasted in the Spring Court with a High Lord who didn't listen to him. And whatever test Rhys put him up against knowingly or unknowingly, Lucien passed it in this moment because Rhys says to Lucien, quote, "You and Asriel should talk tomorrow." Rhys is like, okay, you can be useful, good sir. And I also LOL anytime that Lucien and Asriel are put together in a scene. It's just so delicious. I will say one major thing that did stand out to me in the scene was Mor saying, quote, "Eris might keep that information to himself and convince the others as well if he thinks it'll be more useful this way." Do you think she's saying that from experience? Because he knows something about her and he's keeping a secret that Mor, the more and more we're deep diving this book, the more and more I am convinced that Eris is keeping something a secret for Mor. Like Mor and him share this deep secret. And I think that she's speaking from experience here.
He knows that she didn't want to marry him. And so he did, I'll say, his part in ensuring that she didn't have to marry him because he didn't want her trapped in a marriage she didn't want to be in. Does that mean that he knows her secret of preferring females?
I think that it could be Eris not only knowing that she prefers females, but he also prefers males. But I do think that they shook on it saying I will not tell your secret. That's why I think she's yeah, I think Eris, he'll keep the information as long as he thinks it's good for his own gain. So I think she's still pissed at him. I don't think they have a truce by any means, but I think it's a forced truce, I'll say.
I feel like she's scared of him.
Oh, 100%, because I think he knows her secret and she's afraid that he's going to tell.
So in that case, I actually don't think that I don't think that she knows his secret because then she would have leverage on him. I think that it's strictly that he has leverage on her and therefore he has the upper hand in their dynamic.
Yes. I agree with you, actually. Yes, I agree.
You know how we've been saying the Night Court needs allies? Well, actually, it's the Court of Dreams needs allies and fighters within the Greater Night Court, which is where Kyr, his Darkbringer Legion, and the Court of Nightmares comes in. Yay! The Inner Circle is going to have to visit the Court of Nightmares and ask Kyr for his help. Why can't they just demand he assist? You/Nesta ask. Well, the steward of the Court of Nightmares, aka Kyr, Mor's dad, is legally entitled to refuse to aid the High Lord's armies. It was part of the agreement Rhys's ancestor made with the Court of Nightmares thousands of years ago when his ancestor went to establish Velaris and essentially separate himself from the Court of Nightmares. The Hewn City city is allowed to remain within its mountain and will not challenge or disturb the rest of the Night Court beyond its borders. It essentially governs itself if it has the right to choose not to assist in war. And yes, the Court of Nightmares has refused to aid in war twice in history. The Night Court may have barely won the previous wars without them, but Rhys knows they need every single available soldier to win this war against Hybern. Side note, I'm very curious about these two previous wars. They would have been after the High Lords were established, so it was after the big fight against the Daglan. I wonder if one of them is when Velaris was attacked 5,000 years ago. Anyway, give me a text on the history of Prythian. I'm right now reading Fire and Blood, which is like a history text on the Targaryen dynasty by George R. Martin, and what I would give for the equivalent with Prythian. Kyr's Darkbringers did fight with the Night Court in the war 500 years ago, even though his army's behavior was almost as bad as the enemy's. Rhys knows that he will need to offer Kyr something he can't refuse. And not only that, but to offer something where he's even in a position to set new rules and keep these Darkbringers in line. We will learn soon enough that what Rhys is willing to offer Kyr is access to Velaris, which we will get into next episode.
In this scene, the writing is so smart because we see a group of people working together, basically like they have been for 500 years. We see a guy who also has a lot of ins and outs of the Seven Courts. So Nesta asking these questions throughout the scene, she is almost standing in as the avatar for us, the reader, asking why they're going to the Court of Nightmares and doing the court politicking rather than Rhys just like ordering them. Like from a writing standpoint, I just want to call out how helpful it is for us, the reader.
With all this talk of having to ally with the Court of Nightmares and parley with Kyr, Mor is understandably not liking it. Governing the hewn city from afar and dealing with them when necessary is one thing, but asking them for help when it inevitably means giving something up, though she doesn't know what yet, that's entirely another. She even brings Azriel into this, directly asking him for his opinion. Bless poor Az's heart. He responds, "It's not my call to make." He's like, I'm not getting into this.
Yeah.
I sympathize with Mor's perspective, having to ask her father who she hates for help and essentially showing their hand that they're desperate for his assistance. And at the same time, this is war where it's everyone on deck. Mor is smart and strategic. She knows what war and even war with Hybern is like. Everyone has to shelve their personal feelings for the greater good, as much as it sucks. Feyre will even bring up later to Rhys in a moment of honesty that she worries working with Kyr will drive a wedge between Mor and Rhys. And she's like, is it worth it? Rhys could truly wound his cousin if he doesn't play it right. And he gives a blunt answer, quote, "We've been working with Kyr for centuries. She should be used to it by now. And yes, his troops are worth it. The Darkbringers are well-trained, powerful, and have been idle too long." I mean, I have to say, I agree with Rhys. War is war, and personal sacrifices must be made. I feel for Mor. I really do. This is a shitty situation. War is shitty. I don't know what else to say.
I also have a note for Feyre because bringing up later, like, is it worth it to bring in Kyr's troops and all this kind of stuff? Like, Feyre, you know, because you talked to Branna and Dagden, how royally fucked you all are in this war. And you're literally being like, but is it worth hurting Mor's feeling? So much so that they were literally like, have you gone to Draken and Miriam? Like, have you gone to this remote place? And there's these people literally like a hop, skip, and a jump away. And she's like, are you sure you should go? I get the emotional impact it has on Mor. I get them not wanting to drive a wedge in the inner circle, especially because they are the pillar here. And y'all are fucked. Like, bring all the hands on deck that you can.
I wholeheartedly agree with you. Mor logically understands what they need to do to prepare for this war, but it doesn't make it any less difficult for her. She and Rhys will get through this. They will struggle, but they will get through this like they do. She's allowed to be upset, and it's also not fair for her to hold this over Rhys's head when the fate of the world is on the line. And she ultimately won't hold it over his head. She will be very upset, and Rhys will take great care in how he navigates this. And again, we will get into that next episode.
It is time for a quick subject change, though. At dinner, Feyre just declares that she would like to learn how to fly. And the reactions might as well have been her saying she just vacationed with the King of Hybern himself. Mor spews her wine across the table at Azriel, who does not even pay attention to the fact that he's now covered in wine because he's gaping at Feyre. Cassian is in between laughing and gawking. Like, I love our peeps, but like, she can shapeshift. This is pretty natural, I feel like. It turns out that there is more to fighting for Illyrians than just knowing how to fly. You need to know how to carry your shield and your weapons while flying. You need to know how to work within a unit. This is something that normally takes Illyrian warriors decades to master. So this is absolutely priming us readers for when she watches a battle and she's like, oh yeah, no, I cannot do that. I will say this. I love that she wants to learn how to fly. And I 100% agree with Rhys that yes, it does take Illyrians normally decades to master this. He says, quote, I'll give her any shot at an advantage at getting away if things go to shit, even if a day of training might make a difference. I agree with Rhys. Train away, Feyre darling.
And her little bit of training that she does get will help her when it matters for escaping Hybern.
So there's only one question. Which of the three bat boys will teach Feyre to fly? And Azriel is the first to raise his hand. Since most Illyrians, including Rhys and Cassian, were taught to fly so young, they A, barely remember the beginning lessons, and B, they don't know what it's like to not know how to fly. Basically, they don't know what the mental blocks and fears might be. But what Azriel doesn't have to say here is that Azriel, because he was locked away in the dungeons for years, he did not learn how to fly until later in life. We know as readers that Azriel did not learn to fly until he was age 11. And so he had much more of those mental blocks and fears that he had to overcome, just like he knows Feyre will as well. I also love that Azriel is the one to raise his hand because Feyre's had her time to bond with Cassian during, hand-to-hand training. Rhys with her training of magic and, not to mention everything else around them. They've had their time to bond. It feels so fitting that Azriel, the third bat boy, is her trainer in flying. And it gives us readers an opportunity to bond with him more just because we haven't had as much page time with him as we have like Cassian and Rhys. Feyre is not the only one expanding her training regimen, though. After Feyre asks Nesta if she'd be willing to patch up the holes in the wall, Nesta agrees, but Amren volunteers to help train Nesta in this ability. And Nesta shockingly is like, yeah, okay, only if the King of Hybern, the Mortal Queens, if they're all dead by the end of this war.
Nesta is out for blood, and I love it.
Same. Feeling confident and like, oh, my sister agreed to something. Let's go a step further. Feyre, feeling confident from getting Nesta to agree on training for the holes, goes one step further. She does not ask, but instead tells Nesta that they might need her for a later testimony during the High Lords meeting about what happened to her in Hybern. But no, Feyre darling, that is one step too far. I'm going to go off on Feyre for a second because I love her. I love her. She's fucking smarter than this. She is so focused on the goal right now, which I get, of, war and wanting to save everyone, that she has completely forgotten that Nesta hates being vulnerable. Nesta does not mind going to the Court of Nightmares or the Wall or asking Amren why her eyes glow because she does not fear those things. She does not fear any of the monsters of Prythian, so to speak. But Nesta fears letting any emotional wall down more than anything. That is fear number one for Nesta. And this is the most vulnerable thing she could possibly share to a room of absolute strangers. So of course Nesta outright refuses Feyre.
Which, to Feyre's credit, she will recognize her mistake when she confides in Rhys on their walk through Valaris. I absolutely agree, where it's almost like she did get that tunnel vision there, where it's like, and she felt bolstered because, oh my God, my sister agreed to something. Let's see if she agrees to this as well. And I bet she didn't even realize that she wasn't asking her, but rather telling her. And I appreciate that she owns that mistake that she made.
Same. And again, this is just another instance of our characters, specifically our main character, being imperfect and making mistakes. Later, Nesta will make the choice to come to the High Lords meeting and share her story. But that is because it was her choice to share her story, not someone telling her.
Training her powers and helping with the wall are actions and goals that are more within her personal control. I'm coming back to this control aspect with Nesta. It's about what she is capable of. However, sharing her story at the High Lords meeting is relying on others' responses to what she has to say. And that's absolutely where she draws the line, because she is working on obtaining control of what she's capable of, training her powers, all of those sorts of things. And being vulnerable with others is not within her control. Later in Silver Flames, when Nesta reflects back on these weeks leading up to the war, she thinks that she was managing, I'll say, her well-being by stepping into this world with these people and starting to see her future. Nesta is a goal-oriented person, and when she starts training with Amren with the goal of repairing the holes in the wall, she finds a purpose and, in her own words, starts to see a future for herself here. As a parent, I'm always doing my best to make sure that my kids get the nutrients and vitamins they need to stay healthy and happy. But it's crazy how typical children's vitamins are basically candy in disguise, which is exactly why Hiya was created. It's a pediatrician-approved, super-powered chewable vitamin designed for kids 2 and up. Plus, it's sent straight to your door, so we parents have one less thing to worry about.
While most children's vitamins are filled with 5 grams of sugar and can contribute to a variety of health issues, Hiya is made with 0 sugar and 0 gummy junk. Yet, it tastes great and is perfect for those little picky eaters like I was when I was a young warthog. Hiya fills in the most common in modern children's diets and provides the full body nourishment kids need with a yummy taste that they'll love. It's non-GMO, vegan, dairy-free, allergy-free, gelatin-free, nut-free, and anything else free you can imagine.
I recently introduced Hiya vitamins to my son, who's now 3, and he loves them. My daughter, she's almost 2, so she will be getting those very soon. He does his little ask for more, and I gotta say, I just feel like I am winning as a mom when he gets his nutrients and loves it so much. Plus, they provide stickers with the first order to decorate your Hiya bottle, and you know what? It's just the little things that make vitamins extra fun, you know?
We've worked out a special deal with Hiya for their best-selling children's vitamin. Receive 50% off your first order. To claim this deal, go to hiyahealth.com/FFG. This deal is not available on their regular website.
Go to hiyahealth.com. That is HIYAHEALTH.com/FFG and get your kids the full body nourishment they need to grow into healthy adults.
While we've referenced most of the moments of Rhys and Feyre's conversation walking the Sidra River, there are just a few little moments I want to pull that we have not chatted about. They discuss going to the Court of Nightmares tomorrow, and Rhys tells her that her role is hers to choose. There's that theme again of choice. He says, quote, "You've seen how I am there, how we are. It is for you to decide how to play into that." Feyre will make the choice to be cruel, but wild and playful and heathenous. Different from the heathen god's pet plaything that she was under the mountain, that she was in the Court of Nightmares last book. She will be his equal heathenous god plaything in the Court of Nightmares going forward. And I love how she's made that adjustment where you can still see Feyre it's just fully Slytherin Feyre, like absolutely come out to play. And I love it. The second moment I want to pull is this really sweet moment with Rhys saying that they deserve to be happy and he will fight with everything he has for that happiness. But Feyre does challenge him, just like he asked for. She says, quote, "We will fight, not just you, not anymore." These two are so freaking similar with their self-sacrificing blah, because yes, they will both fight. And on multiple occasions, they will actually put themselves in scenarios where death is very much a possibility. And one of them will literally die, which I will note, he does not agree in this scene to the "we will fight" that Feyre ademns from his "I will fight."
Well, and that's why they end up making the bargain at the very end. It's kind of like she calls him out on like, whoa, like we agreed on this. And obviously I'm really paraphrasing here. It was much more sentimental than that. And that is why they have that bargain, is to truly hold each other accountable to we will fight together. We will survive together. I just can't wait to get into all of that. But we're getting ahead of ourselves.
But what are they fighting for? It is that future together that is so very important to them, that they will not let war take away from them. Remember last book, right before Rhys came in to do his chapter 54 download, Feyre thinks to herself, quote, "A future I saw for myself, bright as the sunrise over the Sidra." Feyre has been fighting for goals her entire life, but they have always been the goals of others, or goals that were thrust upon her. Her mother, the safety of her family, the spring court. She finally has a goal all her own. And she's sharing it with Rhys, but it really came from her. And she will do whatever it takes to make that goal her future. So she takes Rhys's hand here and asks him to walk with her through the rainbow. And it's so appropriate that they finish their walk this evening through a place that literally brought her back to life and brought that goal that she is fighting so desperately to the forefront.
I just love it so much. It's such a full circle moment after she couldn't even walk through the Rainbow of Velaris last book, but now that's where she comes alive even more. The next morning at 8 a.m., I should add what I would give to sleep until then. But anyway, Cassian's a little short with Feyre at training, which is interesting because for the few days she's been back and they've been interacting, he hasn't shown signs of being upset with her. There have understandably been plenty of other things going on. Nesta has been on both their minds, and there's that gosh darn impending war, and Cassian is probably just so relieved and glad she's back. But now she's in the training ring, and right off the bat, he addresses how she's been gone for a month and a half and needs to get back to the basics. For a while, I was thinking how this doesn't make sense because he hadn't been mad at her previously, like I was just saying. But the more I've thought about it and applied it to the real world, the more it makes sense. I'm sure this has been on his mind, but he hasn't had a chance to fully process his feelings to the point of being able to express them to her or even to himself fully. And yes, there has been a lot of other stuff going on, but right here, right now, it's all stripped down to them trading. And guess what? Her departure for a month and a half directs how today's lesson goes. So in my headcanon, I think he was stewing on how training would go today, last night, and this morning. And all those buried feelings came to the surface and started festering. And Cassian is someone who mostly wears his emotions on his sleeve. And once the floodgates opened, there was no shutting them off.
Which, pause, who else does that remind us of? Oh yeah, his mate.
It's the two sides of the same coin.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. So here they are, where he can finally share with Feyre how upset he is that she and Rhys didn't tell the rest of them the very important fact that she is their High Lady and that she left because she didn't think she was vital.
The fact that Cassian is mad at her and it not even being on her radar, so much so that Feyre has to guess twice, like, why are you so mad, Cassian? And it's not even her. It's like, is something with Nesta? Is it da-da-da-da? And then she finally realizes, oh, you're mad at me. Like, this just proves how she's not even been close to thinking about his feelings with this. But it's not just the fact that Feyre and Rhys went and made her High Lady and didn't tell them. It's the fact that she, the High Lady, was so quick to sacrifice herself. And Cassian was like, I should have protected you. It's back to that guilt of that being the protector. He is the High General. This is something that Feyre innately has done since day one of our time with her. She is quick to sacrifice herself. And quite frankly, no one's ever gotten mad at her about it before. Look at what happened under the mountain. She was the one who was hunting for so long for her family. Like, this is just part of who Feyre is at her core. Feyre wonders what difference it would have made if Cassian and the others had known. And this is very telling at how she views her new role as High Lady. She knows it is a big deal, obviously. And at the same time, among family, she does not see it as the weight that it actually holds, almost viewing it as the same as being Rhys's mate, which Cassian dutifully corrects her here. With Rhys, he was hers to protect, just like she is his to protect. But as High Lady, she is all of theirs to protect. He feels like he failed his High Lady when the time was really needed. When they were being fucked right and left, let's be honest. And Cassian didn't even get to find out that she is the High Lady until weeks later because he was sedated when his wings were growing back. Personally, I 100% get Cassian's anger around this and what I would have given to be a fly on the wall during him and Rhys's conversation when they had it out about this. But this all boils down to a much deeper meaning about status, duty, promises, and all that stuff. This is that Feyre sacrificed herself in Hybern because she does not feel that she is an essential part of this family and inner circle. Again, we're going back to Cassian's freaking emotional intelligence here. He knows that this isn't just about High Lady. He knows that at the core, Feyre sacrificed herself because she's like, I'm not a vital person. I'm dispensable, basically. And he hit the nail right on the head. Back in that scene with Hybern, Feyre believed that because she failed the mission, she also thinks that she failed her sisters. And so she believes that this sacrifice was one that she deserved, quite frankly, and that if she failed them this badly, clearly they do not need her as the High Lady.
Cassian argues that if they had known she was their High Lady, it would have changed everything with the Hybern mission. And we can be Captain Hindsight all we want, but though I personally do side with Feyre here, I don't know how that would have changed their circumstances. Except, possibly Cassian or Azriel would have died, stopping her from doing what she did. They were already on the brink of death and they couldn't do very much. But if they had known that she was their High Lady, they would have literally died trying to protect her. Not saying that they wouldn't do that her just being Rhys's mate, but there is that nuance there that makes all the difference for Cassian. Or they would have stopped her from her attempt to nullify the cauldron the way that she did. Remember, it was Cassian who said to give her a minute after she put the two halves of the Book of Breathings together. So maybe he's even thinking about that. And that was a point that he was regretting, because in the moment he let her do her thing. And if he had known that she was their High Lady, he would not have taken that same action.
Feyre, in this training scene, as she's, punching Cassian's arms, she lets out the truth. She says, quote, "You all have a duty. You're vital. Yes, I have my own abilities, but I'd rather it was me than any of you." Oy, that two sides of the same coin. It strikes again. This right here is one of the major reasons Feyre is struggling with this High Lady role right now. Cassian, he is head general. Mor, she is the leader of the cities. Amren is the second. She's the advisor. She's the book decoder. And Azriel,
she's a big scary person, or the tiny ancient one, I should say.
And Azriel is spy master. They all have very specific titles and roles. And she's still figuring out what her roles are under her High Lady title. Remember, Feyre is someone who likes having goals. Have we said that enough? And almost like figuring out what her goal / her role is of being High Lady is something she's missing, which is why she feels like she's constantly still putting Rhys on that pedestal. Cassian gives Feyre a bit of background as to how Rhys actually was when she was away, because he acts all calm and cool and collected with Feyre. But Cassian tells her that he was in a panic while she was gone. Quote, "Yes, he knew. We knew you could handle yourself, but it doesn't stop us from worrying." This is honestly just a good life lesson I wanted to pull, because I need to be reminded of this sometimes as well. Because just because someone's worried, it doesn't mean that you're incapable or weak. So there's your little life lesson for the week.
Yes, it really strikes home, especially as a parent.
Oh, yeah. And then we get down to the root of why Cassian is so mad. Rhys pulled the same shit on them 50 years ago. And it finally dawns on Feyre. Oh, that's right. Rhys made the same self-sacrificing decisions that night. He bound Cassian and the rest of the inner circle to Velaris, making it so that they could not go after Rhys. He made decisions that took away their choices to come to his aid. And it tortured them for 50 years, knowing that he was doing it for their protection. And while it wasn't 50 years, Feyre made the same type of choices in that moment. Quote, "You can rely on us, both of you. He's inclined to do everything himself, to give everything himself. He can't stand to let anyone else offer up anything. Neither can you." Have we mentioned that these two are similar, and not always in the best ways? Ask for help, friends. This is also a good life lesson for us to remember.
Once Nesta arrives, things get awkward, and Feyre becomes the third wheel, but not in a cutesy way. They're more like two lions circling each other and sizing the other up. I love this little scene of her asking Rhys through the bond to come save her, and their banter that ensues. Also, as someone who likes the realisticness of these world-building political systems, I love that he's unavailable because he's in a meeting with the governors of the palaces. A reminder that the palaces are the 4 market squares in Velaris. Like, I want to be in on that meeting. Anyway.
Spices? I'd be like, where did you get your spices from?
So instead, Rhys sends Azriel, who covers for his arrival by saying, quote, "I need to start our lesson early." And then they leave Cassian to fend for himself with Nesta. Quote, "Cassian was a general, the general of the Night Court. Surely Nesta wasn't anything he couldn't handle. Have I mentioned how excited we are for Silver Flames?" But anyway, back to Azriel and Feyre and their first flying lesson. And the first step in flying lessons, to have wings. Feyre gets a little nervous at the simple necessity, causing Azriel to say, "Do you need me to turn around?" I love him so much. This right here is why we needed flying lessons with Azriel, to get to know him on a more personal level, like Nicole was mentioning a little while ago. Feyre is stalling to summon wings, and Az, of course, knows it because he knows everything. And while this back and forth is definitely funny, it calls to attention how difficult it is for her to mentally tap into Tamlin's power. She has done it before. She summoned wings in front of Lucien. She has turned her eyes nocturnal, but this is a concentrated effort to use his magic, to pull his magic to conjure wings as an Illyrian when there are no distractions. And it feels glaringly obvious to her that this is Tamlin's power. While these powers live within her, she feels a connection to each of the High Lords when she uses their powers. Like how their powers are magnified when she is in their court, or how she feels a certain calling when she is in, say, Tarquin's presence, when she is in their presence. So this is her having to reach out and actively connect to a piece of Tamlin, which understandably feels icky for her, given her personal history with Tamlin. It's almost like Feyre is blocking his power because she can't mentally tap into that connection because she doesn't want to. Quote, some vital piece of my heart recoiled, even as something sharp and vicious in my gut preened at what I'd taken. She pushes past it though, good for you girl, and keeps focusing on those Illyrian wings. We said it during the scene with Lucien, and I'll say it again. I love how she uses Tamlin's power to conjure what is sacred and dear to Rhys. She uses her powers from Tamlin to be something good and closely tied to her mate, and that is just delicious. And ta-da! Our girl's got Illyrian wings. She worked her painter's memory to create them, focusing on Rhys's wings and how they felt and moved and weighed. With some polite feedback from Azriel, she adjusts the wings to perfection. Because she is a shapeshifter turning into an Illyrian, I assume in this moment she is fully turning Illyrian, ovaries and all, but we'll keep today's focus on the wings. Well, it's applicable.
No. This scene is actually quietly one of my favorites in the book because as readers, this is fascinating stuff. Azriel is correcting her wings frame. He's saying it needs to be thicker, which nice. But he's also saying like every single muscle like needs to like make this more girthy or whatever. But seeing how Feyre's back, her like thighs, her calves, like every single muscle in her body works the wings. Quote, everything from my neck to my shoulders to my ribs to my spine to my ass seem to now control them. Which I love the fact that you can like clench your ass in your wings and just go. As someone who does not have wings, like this is fascinating to read because you just never think of these things.
If I had wings, I would literally just tip over and be like a bug on its back. Like,
so, I just love how like all the little insights we get into how difficult these wings are. Again, this is not something that Feyre just conjures and immediately masters. She's really struggling with them. She has to learn what the number one lesson is, which is don't have them drag on the ground. And she can only manage to really raise one. Like, I know I've been saying this throughout this episode, but it's really because the writing style of this set of chapters is so helpful for us readers in expanding our knowledge of the world and the lore.
Feyre wanting to learn how to fly is one more way for her to truly be part of the inner circle. I mean, of course, she already is part of the family without her wings. Think of Mor and Amren who can't fly either. But if she has the capability, she wants to leverage it and to be able to fly like the Bat Boys, fly in battle, or even fly to the House of Wind. It's like learning how to drive, literally. Who wouldn't want to fly? I know I would. Oh my gosh. Although I would be so bad at it. Like
you'd be a bug on the ground.
Yeah. And I just love that she is willing to put herself out there to learn, to be really bad at it, and yet to keep showing up to slowly but surely get better. She worries that these flying lessons are a waste of time, but she will keep showing up. She will keep trying, and that is what is important and what will benefit her in the end. It's only day one, girl. You got this. And dang, Feyre is busy today. First, she trains with Cassian, then she has her flying lesson with Azriel, and then after lunch, she heads to the library beneath the House of Wind to get her research on. We're covering the library in today's serial, so we'll save our discussion specifically about the library itself for that. She and Rhys are in this library to research the wall in hopes of understanding how it works so that they can get closer to knowing how to patch up the holes with Nesta's help.
But it's not just the wall we're learning about on this library trip, because Rhys gives us a mini download. It turns out that many years ago, back when humans were slaves to the Fae, there were great libraries with tomes dating back thousands and thousands of years across Prythian. But humans were not allowed inside of these libraries unless they were slaves on an errand, and even then they were watched very carefully. So the humans, this was all so that they could not get the information that the books held.
Because these books were full of magic and the Fae did not want the humans to have any access to this magic or how this magic works.
So what happened to these great, powerful libraries many, many years ago? They were evacuated with only some of the information and burned. Why would they do this? Great question. I'm so glad you asked. Because they did not want the humans to find the dangerous spells and use them on the High Fae, especially their masters. So they burned these great libraries with thousands of years of tomes in it instead. But when Feyre says humans don't have magic, why would it matter? Rhys tells her, some do. Quote, usually the ones who can claim distant Fae ancestry. He goes on to say, quote, some of those spells don't require magic from the wielder, only the right words or the use of ingredients. From book 1, quote, mortals didn't possess magic, didn't possess any of the superior strength and speed of the fairies or High Fae. The man claiming some High Fae blood in his ancestry just had carved the whirls and swirls and runes on the door and windows, muttered a few nonsense words, and then ambled on his way.
So while this is like, oh my gosh, this is so exciting, I will say whatever marks this particular human put on their house, it didn't work against Tamlin.
That's a good point.
So the fact that it's even possible is foreshadowing alarm, but we know that this particular instance did not actually work.
Now, back to humans can have magic. Question for you. Did you remember this on any of your reads on Aquaphor?
No,
Because
I felt like it was like when we were talking about the Archeron sisters possibly having some Fae lineage. There's so many other examples that we pulled. The Bone Carver or Amarantha, hearing her name. And this definitely was not on my radar. Yeah.
Like, this has to be foreshadowing for something that we're going to learn about the Archeron family. Because there is no way that Feyre, Nesta, and Elaine are all as powerful as they are, and they did not have some kind of High Fae ancestry in their blood.
The history lesson continues as Feyre asks what happened to the half-Fae, half-humans after the war. Rhys explains that it unfortunately did not go well for them. Many were offspring of unwanted unions, and most chose to stay with their human mothers. Note that most had human mothers, where the union was probably forced upon them by Fae males. After the wall went up, these half-Fae, half-humans went south with the mortals since they stuck with their human families. But these people, they were a reminder to the humans of what had been done to them for so long by the Fae. So at best, they were outcasts in society. And at worst, we can gather that they were the scapegoats and brutally paid the crimes by the Fae against the humans. As Rhys says, quote, even if the half-breeds had done nothing wrong, it did not end well. For the half-Fae who stayed above the wall, they were deemed less than lesser fairies. They were unwanted everywhere they went or found work selling themselves in the street. This leads to a discussion between Feyre and Rhys about whether they'll allow humans or Fae refugees into Velaris if the wall comes down. And the simple answer is yes. If anyone needs a safe place, the city will absolutely be open to them. Rhys considers it a good thing to add new people from different places and cultures to Velaris because it has been closed off for too long. But he admits that the logistics will be a little more complicated than that inclusive vision. But that's a problem for another day. Another book series, I suppose, too. I agree on all fronts. Velaris has been closed off for decades, at least as long as Amarantha, and definitely even longer because, of course, it's a secret and blah, blah, blah. Allowing new residents will enhance the culture, add to the melting pot that already is Velaris and all that it represents. Can you imagine the dating pool in Velaris when you're immortal and no one else is allowed into your city? Or like the theaters and like the casting calls every single time. I think about that all the time.
You know that there's one person who's like the star of every single play, and the second they start letting everyone in, they have like rivals now. I would give for that like melodrama.
Yes. But really, the dating scene, I bet it is pretty bad.
Tinder
my goodness.
game would go up.
But I also really do appreciate that Rhys admits it's not so black and white with just letting people in and it just being super easy peasy. My political system lore heart just wants more on all of this and how he will end up bringing new people into Velaris. But alas, that's not the purpose of our story.
We do meet a new character on this library visit. Welcome to the chat, Clotho. Clotho is the library high priestess, and like the rest of the priestesses who have taken refuge in the library, Clotho's past is unfortunately not a pleasant one. Long ago, she was attacked by a group of males, and this kills me. They cut out her tongue and mutilated her hands, which left her fingers crooked, bent, twisted, scarred, because they were healing her hands as they were hurting her to make her injuries permanent. All so that she could not tell or write to anyone what was done to her. Mor found Clotho, and Rhys, using his Daemati powers, learned what happened and shared with Mor so she could go hunt down these motherfuckers. But Clotho has lived in the library ever since. The library has become a sanctuary to her and these other priestesses with very similar stories. Some come to heal, some come to work as an acolyte, some leave, some stay here forever. But no matter what they choose, there is one big rule. No one, not even Rhys, is allowed to enter the library unless the priestesses approve. We will save our major discussion of the priestesses and their life in the library when we get to Gwen, my girl. I'm so excited. I love Gwen so much. Rhys tells Feyre that the library does belong to her now as well, meaning not just because she is High Lady, because she's his maid, the house is technically hers, yada, yada, but because this place belongs to any female who has endured and survived. Feyre smiles and tells him that she supposes it's a miracle that she's able to even be underground because of her trauma under the mountain. And he says, quote, "I am very proud of you." I wept reading this. Maybe this is just me as like an Enneagram 3, but whenever someone says I'm proud of you, that is better than I love you. Like, I love it so much to me. Because as cheesy as it sounds, I'll speak for you here because I think we're very similar.
Yep.
We are so proud of Feyre as well and all that she's overcome. Clotho takes them to a room with paper, pens, and a low table. It's got reading lamps, a silver tea service, little sandwiches, biscuits, and 2 leather couches next to a fireplace, and many books. This is my heaven. What can I do to go here? I want to do that. But that's not the only thing I love about this scene, because we get some sexual, playful tension. Feyre reminds Rhys that her reading lessons included, quote, "Rhys is the greatest lover a female could ask for." And Rhys is like, "I was just reminding you what you now know." But this leads to some very heated moments from Rhys where he's telling her he's going to pull her through the stacks and see how quiet she can be. Rat her out on the desk and make her scream loud enough to wake whatever beast lies at the bottom of the library that scared the shit out of Cassian. Goodness! But then he vanishes because he has to focus. One thing that readers typically don't love about when a couple gets together in books is there's not that tension. There's not that like playful
slow burn. Yeah, exactly.
And it's true. But what I love about ACOWAR is that it is different. And this is one of the reasons it is going up my list through this deep dive. I love moments like this in books where we still get that joking, playful romance with the tension. It's just in a different, more comfortable manner. Rather than like, oh my God, they're about to kiss for the first time. It's like, oh my God, like you get me all hot and bothered. Like it makes me so happy until he winnows away. I would have been like, you bastard, get back up here. Because his hand is like on... pardon my vulgarness, his hand is on her clit. And then he's like, bye.
During their focus time, our 2 lovebirds do learn some information about the wall. Interestingly, many of the texts are conflicting as each claims absolute authority on the subject. Why am I not surprised? But the similarities that even Rhys did not know include the wall was never made to last. It was supposed to be a temporary solution to cleave human and fairy until peace settled long enough for them to be able to later regroup, take a deep breath and figure out how they can live together as one people. After the tension cooled down with the Fae enslaving the humans for millennia and all that. But you know how humans don't live as long as Fae? Over the generations of their short lives, they forgot the promises of those signed by the treaty. And the High Fae learned how to adjust to life without slaves, without humans, because lesser fairies stepped in to replace the missing free labor, and territories had been redrawn to accommodate those displaced. As a whole, the aftermath of the war created such a great shift in both societies and the entire world as they worked toward healing and adjusting to this new life separately. So with all of this in place, the wall ended up being permanent. I'll be honest, it makes total sense. And I love how just the concept of societies and the humans and just dying off and the generations forgetting. I just love how that all tied into history did not turn out the way that it was expected to.
Rhys and Feyre moved their talks to what would happen if Rhys and the King of Hybern fought one-on-one. Basically, would Rhys stand a chance? Can we nix this all before it even starts? And the truth is that the king of Hybern, he is smart. He would try to find a way to outsmart them long before ever facing Rhys in a challenge. And if they did finally challenge each other, it would most likely be catastrophic. And that is with him not wielding the cauldron, which, pause, they will fight one-on-one, kind of, but the king of Hybern does outsmart them because he's actually just appearing as a hologram.
Yeah. They'll have more of a verbal spar.
Yeah. Yikes. But Rhys tells Feyre that he will face him in battle if it means they stand a chance, and he will take the brunt of the force of everything. And Feyre's like, didn't we just talk about this, Rhys? Are you serious? Earlier, Cassian said to Feyre, quote, if the High Lords and Keir don't step up, he'll, Rhys, still face Hybern, and he will take the brunt of it so we don't have to. Yes, he will literally be giving up his life later this book for this exact reason. Here, Rhys tells her that he doesn't feel like he's given enough, not yet. This is a classic Rhys moment and major foreshadowing again for his death later in this book. But Feyre asks him a good question. Where the fuck did this come from, my guy? And he does not answer, which is honestly kind of surprising from Rhys, given how much he normally shares and is open with Feyre. So I guess my question for you is, where do you think this came from? Like, why do you think he is so gung-ho on, I still have not given enough yet? Which, by the way, I take enough as like, enough is finally my life.
I agree. And even that's almost like the least that he can give, so to speak. I think that there is some guilt from what happened in Hybern. Same thing with Feyre. She was not able to save her sisters. Like Cassian and Azriel almost died. They failed the mission, and Rhys really does take that upon himself too. His mate had to go into enemy territory and sacrifice herself because he was not able to find another solution. It also could be shame from what he did while in Amarantha's service and how he had to do awful things to other people, and how this is what he feels like he deserves, you know, where it's like he did all these terrible things that the way he can make it right is by saving everyone and him not making it in the process.
Yeah. I think you're onto something.
Last thing I'll say on that too is this is also just Rhys's character. Yes. Remember the prologue of this book too. And he did talk about that self-sacrificing nature. We learned from Jurian about how he went into the trap that was set for Draken. Like, that is simply Rhys at his core. And so all of these things that have happened to him since then have really compounded and magnified it now.
Well, and on that same note, as I was doing this part of the outline, it dawned on me, and it actually really helped heal my, I'll call it anger with the pregnancy trope that happens in Silver Flames. I think that this is the reason why Rhys doesn't tell Feyre that Nyx's wings are going to kill her in labor. He does not want to offload that burden, so he carries it on his own so that she doesn't have to feel the pain. It's, again, that self-sacrificing nature. It's just very short-term thinking. Because this feels way more in character for Rhys in terms of, like, let me save you from the weight of this information. I'm going to take the brunt of it. That feels way more in character for Rhys than I'm not going to tell you something, because that does not feel in character.
Well, that is still his character. He does not tell people things, but it is because he is self-sacrificing and he feels that he should bear that weight. I have so much to say about this with him not telling Feyre, and I'll save most of it for Silver Flames. But I will say right now is that he did not want to put that terrible burden on her. So he shouldered it on his own and self-sacrificed his happiness, his hope for a future in every possible way so that his mate wouldn't feel that fear and despair about something that made her so happy. Yeah. All I'll say on that topic just for right now.
Put a pin in that for 2 books from now. This scene ends with some brilliant fucking Feyre planning, because if they're not going to win with numbers against Hybern, what if they won with monsters instead? This is genius. And she starts off with suggesting the Bone Carver, which one of my favorite parts of this book is Feyre becoming buddies with all these terrifying monsters. Like there's a meme on the internet where it's like this person holding this like feral possum. Like this thing is terrifying. And it's like this person's like, look at this feral possum. And it's like Feyre with Bryaxis. It's so funny.
Yes, exactly.
Since the Bone Carver is looking for ways to get back to his homeworld, he might be interested in exchanging that with a bargain. But we will get into that next episode.
Let's check in on Amren training Nesta. Feyre walks in on them coldly watching the other with a ticking clock, the only sound. I can visualize this so perfectly. Like, it is so vivid in my mind. I love it. I love Amren and Nesta so much. Like, talk about a dynamic duo.
Also, okay, question for you. Who from the inner circle would you want to be your teacher / trainer?
Cassian.
And you cannot have Cassian. You cannot have Cassian. So Rhys, Amren, Azriel, I guess even more I'll throw in there. Like, who of those 4, because you cannot have Cassian, who would you want to be your trainer?
Rhys, hands down. I would banter with him all day long, and it would be such an excellent motivator for me. But that's only because I can't have Cassian. Although I will say he would kick my ass. Like, I can't even do a push-up, and he would probably make me cry with all of his talking down at me. Who would you choose?
Oh, Rhys, absolutely. Rhys. No question in my mind. But also because he would be an excellent motivator. But that's just because, like for instance, when I was in college and there was a hot guy in the gym, I would work out 10 times when I was just on my own. Here's what I will say with Azriel, because originally I was like, maybe, but he's so quiet. I would feel the need to fill the silence the entire time.
Yes, me too.
Because I hate silence. If you can't tell, because we're such fast talkers, like I can't imagine. I will say, I think Mor and I would get along really well, but I would have a hard time taking her seriously because I would just view her as my friend, versus Rhys, who I would try to impress because he's hot.
And there'd be like a little bit of fear of him
absolutely.
too. Where it's like, okay, I promise I'll do it. I promise. Anyway, Feyre tries to see how things are going. You know, she's checking in on the lesson, and Amren calls her a busybody. She's not wrong.
No.
Nobody ever is wrong when they're calling Feyre a busybody. But right now, Feyre is busybodying with other intentions as she carefully and strategically approaches the topic of the prison. And Amren takes the bait. She's not ready to tell Amren about her plan to talk to the Bone Carver about joining them against Hybern, but she is hoping for some information. Amren only spoke to the other inmates in whispers and echoes through rock. And that's pretty much all we get out of her as she continues concentrating on her lesson with Nesta and enforcing Nesta to concentrate as well. I just love how Amren's like, she doesn't need luck. And Nesta huffs a laugh. Yep, these two are fast friends indeed. I think Nesta appreciates someone else who is blunt and no nonsense. It makes her feel not so alone.
Absolutely, 100%. That evening, Feyre has a nightmare. There is a sentence I have not said in a while. Feyre is under the mountain, and in place of Claire Better's mutilated, smelly body is Nesta being tortured on the wall. Elaine is being roasted over a spit, just like the prison guards threatened to do to Feyre when she was cleaning the floors under the mountain. Feyre herself is chained to the floor, just like Lucien was during the second task, including one of Feyre's biggest fears of seeing Rhysand in this position again with Amarantha. And also note that Feyre calls Rhys Rhysand in this dream, just like she called him Rhysand, mostly under the mountain. This dream is the symbolism of everything building up into a peak, that final battle where everything comes together. Previously, these dreams were all separate, but now everything she fears is all roped into one. A voice pulls her from this dream, though. Breathe, he commands several times before Feyre finally comes back into her body enough to vomit over the side of the bed, all while Rhys is rubbing her back. Good husband, very nice. Tomorrow, when he asks her, what do you want to talk about, what happened in the dream? I love he says with me or with anyone, knowing that sometimes she might not want to talk to him about it. She tells him that with everything bearing down on them, it opened up a part of her that was slowly repairing. And after she tells him all that happened in the dream, quote, the savage grip on those terrors lightened, cleared away like the dew of the sun. I freed a long breath as if blowing those fears from me, letting my body loosen in its wake. She's kind of taking Cassian's advice here from earlier after he said that she and Rhys do not let any others take on the burden and they try to face it all alone. Here she is offloading that burden onto her mate. Go Feyre! Way to take a note! This chapter stretch ends with Feyre saying, never again. Those two words always come up in our SJM books, and it's always in a very pivotal moment for our characters. It happened in Akamath when Feyre finally decided to defy Tamlin's stupid, it would send a bad message for you to train, and she decided to train her powers. It happens in the most beautiful scene ever in A Court of Silver Flames with Nesta during a scene that is literally the turning point in her training, but that's at the most surface level way I can describe it. And when we cover that part of the book, I will be a weeping mess. But here, Never again means never again will I let myself be trapped under the mountain. Never again will I let myself be helpless or let others sacrifice themselves for me. Never again will she see her sisters put through that torture they endured in the cauldron. And of course, never again will she let anyone hurt Rhysand or his wings.
While we've already talked a lot about foreshadowing this episode, let's turn our full attention to foreshadowing important moments in the rest of this book and the series.
When talking about Nesta's eyes being spooky scary when she came out of the cauldron, there is that silver fire that we will be talking all about in A Court of Silver Flames.
And then I know I mentioned this, but just giving a blanket statement of Cassian and Nesta. Full stop. Yeah. There, that's the foreshadowing all over the page every time they're together. And we also get a teaser about what has been happening with the human queens. They're locked up in their palace. Nobody really knows what's going on. Yes, indeed. We will learn that the youngest mortal queen who wanted to go into the cauldron was indeed turned fae. But because the cauldron was pissed at what Nesta took, it took what the queen valued most, her youth and beauty. So now she's an immortal old crone who has a real temper.
I hate her. Oh my God. We get another Nesta is a queen on a throne mention. And honestly, I'm just kicking myself for not starting a count back in ACOTAR because I'm pretty sure we're on like 6 at the minimum.
Oh, at minimum, yes. Mor complains about how Rhys gets all the credit for Feyre's clothing, but he never tells Mor where he finds them. Well, we will learn that Rhys's mom, who had been an Illyrian seamstress, made all Rhys's future mates' clothing.
Amren says to Nesta, quote, "If you want his killing blow, girl, it's yours," meaning the King of Hybern. Killing blow she will have indeed. However, it is Elaine who stabs him first. I'm salivating to get to this Arya Stark moment. Feyre learns that the wall was only supposed to be up for as long as it takes for human and fae to find peace, quote, and decide how to live together as one people. This is almost exactly what she says in the final meeting with the High Lords after the battle. This does not ultimately happen because they end up putting a little pin in this meeting, which I'm guessing is going to be a come back at some point in our series, but it is.
Yeah.
I hope so. But
SJM is kind of like, I'm going to keep focusing on the romance and the character development, which is still wonderful, by the way. I'm not complaining about that. And just like kind of sweep all the other political ramifications under the rug.
She's like, I'll just leave this plot open if I want to come back to it at a later date. But they've probably forgotten. Not us, SJM. We will not. And then, of course, Cassian having a fascination with the prison and its inmates, which we will learn a lot more about in, you guessed it, A Court of Silver Flames, specifically because he is responsible for jailing some of them, including our dude, creepy-ass Lanthus. It is time to sip some tea with the Suriel because every episode, Lexi will sit down with the Suriel, sip some tea, and walk us through a world-building topic to help us better understand the world and the people in it.
Today's Suriel topic is the library below the House of Wind. It is built inside a cavern carved out of the red stone mountain where the House of Wind is located, far beneath the mountain where the air is dry and cool and heavy. Its architecture is structured as if the base of the mountain has been hollowed out, creating a vast pit that goes into the dark heart of the world. Spiraling around this gaping hole that goes into the inky black, there are many levels upon levels of shelves and shelves of books, reading rooms nestled among them, some even with fireplaces. Despite the library's size, it's quite cozy and warm. The floors and spiraling path are polished and smooth red stone, perfect for sledding, I might add. Inside the library, you can hear the rustle of parchment and paper. Feyre describes it as silent but alive, awake and humming and restless. I just love this so much. What a perfect explanation for a library. The library has been around for a long time, and it used to be occupied and run by, quote, cranky old scholars of Velaris. However, we can guess about several centuries ago, because it was after Rhys became High Lord, these cranky old scholars were relocated to other libraries in the city, so this library could be turned into a sanctuary for priestesses who have experienced trauma. It is run by High Priestess Clotho, who is the first priestess brought to the library following a brutal attack that left her permanently incapable of speech or with the use of her hands. There are dozens of priestesses who work in the library and reside in the dormitories within the library. The library is considered a temple of sorts, and it is a safe haven for them. We'll explore the priestesses and what this library is to them in a future Suriel once we get to Silver Flames, but had to, of course, note that when we're talking about the library. It is important to know, though, that no one is allowed entry to the library without the priestess's permission. Outsiders who come for research must take a binding oath to do no harm when they visit. There's a spelled bell inside the library, which is used to sound an alarm. It directly alerts the inner circle. Let's talk about what lurks in that dark hole when you go to the lowest levels, or at least start the conversation, because it's quite a doozy. Cassian, my love, cover your ears right now. There is a dark well where a creature lives, and its name is Bryaxis. No one knows this monster's true form, but we know that it embodies fear. Cassian is absolutely terrified of it. 200 years ago, Rhys dared Cassian to see what was in this pit, and he ran back up, pale and petrified. To this day, he refuses to share what he saw and falls back into a fear-induced state when it is brought up. But Bryaxis doesn't bother the priestesses, and they don't bother it. They all just kind of live in harmony, I guess you could say, and they just don't bother each other. Once we get to Silver Flames, Nesta discovers that this dark pit is where the heart of the House of Wind is. Quote, the heart of the world of existence. This is a little bit confusing. So it's my understanding that this is different than the creature Bryaxis, who lives in this darkness, or does until it is free to fight in the war and then doesn't return despite everyone searching for Bryaxis. This really calls that the darkness might seem scary, but in truth, it is beautiful and fractured, just like the priestesses. And it really does actually tie back to Rhys's lesson to Feyre last book, when it was all about, it's all about your perspective on the darkness. That, friends, is our surreal tea time on the library.
Let's finish out the ACOTAR only part of this episode with our favorite moments. Cassian basically wiggling his eyebrows at Feyre and Rhys when they come downstairs after bang, bang, bangity bang, and then Asriel kicking him under the table. Like, you know that song right now? It's like the I beg you don't embarrass me, motherfucker. That's just Asriel.
When Feyre and Rhys slip their rings onto each other's fingers in their bedroom before coming downstairs, the way they solidify their love and commitment to one another is always simple and private, but so meaningful and so on brand for them. As Feyre notes, quote, more intimate and searing than any publicly made vows.
When going up to the House of Wind, Feyre starts talking with Lucien, and Cassian and Rhys go into the dining room and, quote, they are leaning too casually against a giant oak table in its center. They became immensely interested in a spot or a stain on the surface between them. All I can say is, don't be suspicious, don't be suspicious.
Lucien saying Amren acts, quote, more like a cranky old aunt than anything, instead of the evil monster who, drinks children's blood and takes them to hell. I just love that description of Amren. Yes. Feyre and Rhys flying over Velaris and waving down to the people who are waving up at them. All I can ever think is that part of The Office, which makes me think of our walk to the LeakyCon ball. And there was another very religious conference going on in the large convention center. And there were hundreds of people outside for their conference photos. And there was like a drone and they were all waving up at it. And then there was us just walking, by the way, with the actor who played Victor Crumb. And we were just all photobobbing it. And it was a complete accident because there was no other path to the ball. And it was a whole thing that this other conference attendees were doing. Anyway, sorry for photobombing your drone waving. And I do apologize to them.
I don't think I've ever seen us and Victor Crumb look so nervous, just like speed walking through this thing. Oh my God.
Cassian gives Lucien only an hour before he tries to see Elaine. You would know that pull toward your mate, Cassian. You would know. And then, quote, I didn't know whether to laugh or cringe. The latter won out as the book murmured, hello, sweet-faced liar. Hello, Princess With.
And then Amren literally looks at the Book of Breathings and goes, be quiet. Like, she's saying this to the Book of Breathing. Like, I love how she's just like whacking it on the nose with a piece of newspaper. It's so funny. Nesta coming out for dinner.
It's like a misbehaved pet to her.
Seriously, though. Nesta coming out for dinner and, quote, Cassian looked like someone had punched him in the gut. Oh, it's so cute. But also punched him in the gut. Like perfect phrasing for him as a warrior. Nesta saying, quote, why should I be scared of an oversized bat who likes to throw temper tantrums? Listen, she's a bitch, but she's at least an amazing bitch. Like, I love it. Everything around Cassian being afraid of Bryaxis, like the many memes that were born from that one small plot point. And then Mor and Rhys trying to oil themselves up and go sledding down the spiraling path of the library. How did I forget about this? That's just
I completely forgot about this. I also just love like these little nuggets of backstory that we do get from their childhood, and just like seeing how much history all of them have and how many happy memories they all do have despite all of the darkness that they've endured as well.
I feel like the theme of today's episode is, hey, remember this thing that happened in all of ACOWAR? Oh, friends, we are about to begin our Massverse Madness section for the day.
Today's Massverse Madness includes spoilers for the Crescent City series. So if you haven't read those 3 books, this is where we part ways. But before you go, reminder that next episode, we will be covering ACOWAR chapters 22 through 28. And like we mentioned at the top of the episode, if you're interested in more Fantasy Fangirls content and community and events and just more in general, join the Patreon party at our link in the show notes.
We also have new summer merch. We have koozies. We have tank tops. We also just have a cozy sweater. If you're wanting to bundle up indoors, you can check that out with the link in the show notes or by going to fantasyfangirls.com.
And if you're not following us on TikTok and Instagram, like really, you just can't have social media at that point. Like that is your only excuse. Give us a follow at Fantasy Fangirls Pod.
We're a delight on social media and we post a lot. So there's
we do like content. If you think that with like this, our podcast is really only like scraping the surface at this point. We have so much more on social media.
Please also do not forget to go and rate and review the podcast. It is one of the best things that you can do, not only for this show, but for any show that you listen to. And it takes you like 2 seconds and literally costs $0. Whatever podcasting platform you are listening on, take a moment and hit that 5-star button.
We are now going to enter our Massverse Madness segment of the episode, where we call out series crossover references and discuss theories. Today, we are discussing concepts that give spoilers from Crescent City, so please only continue listening if you've read these 3 books.
We should also note that we are talking about a world-building topic in Throne of Glass. So my first one is really actually more of a theory, I'm going to call it. When Amren says to Nesta, quote, "When you erupt, girl, make sure it is felt across worlds." I'm sorry, is that plural? Worlds? Do you think that this is foreshadowing? Like, considering that we know that Nesta's story is not done. She had the 8-pointed star on her back. Bryce is like, go figure out what that means. Do you think that she's going to have a sacrifice of some sort to erupt? Do you think that this is a yielding of monumental destruction? Because especially if the Archerons do have some witch blood in their veins, they could perform the yielding. Let's move on to the Humans with Magic download, because wow. I'm getting more and more convinced that Feyre is a Starborn Fae descendant, because what if she is somehow in Thea's descendant line, but she was half Fae, half, like her ancestor was half Fae, half mortal. But that's how she has her Starborn powers. Now, she also could have gotten them from Rhys, but now we have so much more insight on how the humans from Throne of Glass. But like humans can have magic in Throne of Glass. So like we do know that there's now more of a connection between the humans in these 2 worlds. But then also like some of the humans in Midgard probably have magic, but the fucking parasite is just diminishing their magic. But Rhys says in this library,
well, the humans in Midgard were already there when all of the Fae and stuff came over. So those humans could be like us humans.
Or they could be like Tog and / or maybe the ACOTAR humans and have magic, but they can't use it because of the parasite.
But the other worlds, those humans would have had to come over from those worlds, but the CC humans were already there.
But if some humans came over from Tog, we don't know about any that came over from ACOTAR, but if some humans came over from Tog, then they would have magic and maybe they bred with the other humans, so now there's just a bunch of diluted magic.
That's absolutely possible, but we do know that no humans came over from the ACOTAR world.
That is true. We do. That is accurate. Rhys says in this library download, though, he says, quote, "Some of those spells don't require magic from the wielder, only the right words or use of ingredients. Not said here, word marks, I believe."
Yeah, which is exactly how humans can use magic in the Tog world.
Exactly.
And then last thing here, again, we will get a lot more into this when we go through Silver Flames, but that fourth Dread Trove item that we were talking about that has the age-worn bone that Nesta can see from what Lanthus projects. It's the horn, folks. It's the horn that is currently in Midgard and that Danica had, and then she essentially entrusted to Bryce. And there you
she
go.
tattooed it on her fucking back is what she did.
Yeah, the same thing. Entrusted it to Bryce,
Against her will, entrusted it to her.
Just sneaky.
Sneaky.
And then also, we're just going to save our Massverse library theories for another time. There is so much that we could talk about with the libraries. And I'm just going to be honest with you. We just came back from LeakyCon. It has been quite the week for us. We kind of lost a day, and we will talk about that at a different time when I have more brain power.
We have been back for several days. I feel hungover. Like, that's how it feels.
I do too. It's been oh my gosh. Like, it's like I feel like I went on a bachelorette trip to Vegas and I didn't. We were not that crazy at all. We had one drink at the ball.
So fun. Oh my God.
All right, friends, that wraps up today's episode. Thank you so much for joining us, especially in our somewhat loopy state here. Next week, we are covering chapters 22 through 28 of ACOWAR.
Thank you, as always, to our executive producer, Hayden, aka our sanity manager. I'm so sorry for your edits on today's episode. This is going to be a bitch to edit. But friends, as always, please be sure to share this episode with your fellow ACOTAR or ACOWAR loving friends. If you have a friend who is like, I wonder what people can say about Nesta in the 2 chapters that she was in this book and talk half an episode about it, send this episode to them because we'll be their friends too.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much. We will see you next week.
Bye. So much so that after this meeting, Cassian offers to carry Feyre to nowhere. Not to anything. Oh my God, it's one of those episodes. Hayden, I'm so sorry.
I just want to go to a taco shop and have a margarita and eat some food and turn my brain off. And go to bed at 8 p.m.
Oh, why does my ear itch?
So sorry, Hayden, for this episode.
I know.
We are just
He's had some easy ones, and now we just come in with the here's a really difficult one for you to edit.